So let me call the Capital Long Range Planning Subcommittee meeting to order at 6:02. Catherine, you're there? Catherine T?
I am. Good evening.
Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome. Good evening.
So let's see. Present for the Capital Subcommittee, we'll just do a quick roll call. Jim Purdy.
Susan Malin.
David Molitano.
Okay. Now, Jamie, are the department heads here to discuss their current capital? Is that what the plan was?
No, I thought the plan was just to talk about what we have on the FY22, the sheet that I sent, and then
Yes, right.
at 6:30 FinCom meeting, they're gonna come in, police, fire, and highway, I believe, come in and talk about their budgets at that time.
Well, the police and fire and Bill Tyaker's here and Steve Kavanaugh are here at 6. Is there some confusion about that?
I hope not. I think I said 6:30 in my email.
Gentlemen, could you put on your speakers for a moment?
I'm just looking for the email that I sent.
Okay,
sometime last week.
So just as a point of information, this is the first meeting of the Capital Long Range Planning Subcommittee. And it consists right now just of myself, David Molitano, and Susan Malin. And the three of us were identified because of our liaison roles and functions. And we haven't even had a meeting yet to describe role function going forward, how we're going to organize this, collect data. Those kinds of questions are in front of us at this point, which we don't have absolute answers to. So I believe fire, DPW, and police should join us at 6:30 because this is kind of an organizational, if you will, to kind of begin to launch the capital planning part of this, if that's okay, gentlemen.
Sure.
Okay, so why don't you just come back on at around 6:30. We'll have our full finance committee meeting. By the way, just as an FYI, Gary, Mr. Cheeseman is going to join us as the first agenda item at our 6:30 meeting to discuss the legislative processes going forward for him to be able to make some independent decisions. It has to go to the governor's office and so on. He wants to present that to Finance Committee to have the support of the Finance Committee in that process with our state rep and our state senator. So just as an FYI, and we'll get to you guys we'll get to you real quickly once you come on at 6:30. Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry
Thank you.
Sorry about the any confusion there. Okay, so we have our new subcommittee, and I did a very ambitious kind of a stream of consciousness agenda, I call it here. So I talked with.
I think we both got excited on that one. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm writing it all down. Great.
It's maybe good to have because these are issues that I think that will come before us in one form or another as we kind of develop this. So where do we want to start here? I'm open to suggestions. Tom, Jamie?
Well, based on your 6 o'clock agenda,
Yeah,
if you're looking, I think the next thing is current long-range capital plans in place is probably the.
so we can start there, or I guess yes, absolutely. But I guess maybe just a little general discussion of the FinCom members and myself and you folks of how do we see this moving forward? What is our kind of a mission? What is our overall goals in establishing a long range capital planning? What are some ideas? I did, I think I sent out the DSL, the Division of DLS, the Division of Local Services, as a nice document, I thought. They did in 16 or 18. But I'm just kind of curious. It would just take a few moments to talk about that from anybody's perspective.
For me, it was pretty self-explanatory to go out, speak to the two departments I should preface it by saying I had a conversation with the fire department last week. I have a conversation with the police department, the chief tomorrow, and just take a look at their needs over the 5 years, understand their priorities. That document from the MassGov was very helpful. And really just so we can understand what's coming up in the next 5 years, how to pay for them and what they think they have to pay for them. And I have some already ideas what to do for the fire department this year as far as how to account for them and what should we be doing. So for me, that's pretty much what it is just to understand a little bit more of the needs. I think it was a little easier since this is my third or fourth year on the FinCom. So I think we're behind. But they in conversations with them both, the police and the fire, they're very appreciative of us reaching out to them and trying to understand their needs. So
good.
We take a neutral view of it because we can't say, no, that's not a good idea, or really, that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. We're reaching out to them, and a great idea for us understanding what they're happening. But in working with the fire department, and I expect the same for the police, as I understand now what their needs are and how we can sort of pay for them.
I think what is important, and it's probably, I'm not muted. It's important in that to whoever my successor is, because what I've worked on in the past takes more time than literally the 4 or 5 months that I'm here. But each department should have, and I don't know if we have it here, should have a robust inventory of their equipment. And basically everything from the date of when they acquired it to its condition to things that have been done to it. So for the next 5, 10, 15 years, particularly with vehicles and heavy duty DPW equipment, where you're headed, so that the Capital Committee and Finance Committee does not see something showing up all of a sudden on the capital budget. Like I've always said about this, you should never see a fire truck showing up on a capital budget unexplained unless it hit a tree. I mean,
Right.
it should be totally planned out. So your expectation is that its 20-year or 25-year life expectancy is over, and then a new pumper is planned on in 2050 or something like that. That's important. Secondly, is also understanding what is a capital item and what is operational. Give you example, carpeting in town hall. I mean, it looks like my office, it's in pretty good shape, but that's generally not a capital item. It's operational because it's something that you're replacing time after time. It may be longer than 5 years, but it's something that's repetitive. And I think those are items that the Capital Committee, Finance Committee, Jamie, and whoever is my replacement should start looking, particularly over the summer. That's the perfect time to be looking at these type items and going for a full process. So there is no surprise for Jamie. There is no surprise to the Finance Committee, to a lesser degree, but no surprise to the Select Board either.
So one of the first steps you're suggesting, and this came up in the Commonwealth Local Services document, is taking an inventory.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I think, the second step. The first step was organizing the committee, which I found kind of interesting because what we've done, Gary has requested that we begin to establish some kind of long-range planning subcommittee. In reading the Commonwealth's document, it looks like you can also, they were talking about a bylaw. that a bylaw be established for such a committee.
Mhm.
Get kind of a chartered subcommittee, if you will, reporting to either the finance or the Board of Selectmen. I think at the end of the day, it's the Board of Selectmen who have to make the final decisions on this, where we become advisory. But I think right now, we're I'm going to use the word informal because there's no bylaw that instructs us. We're a subcommittee of the Finance Committee. We have no other members assigned to this from the community. I talked, in fact, with the chairman of the Long Range Planning Committee and Long Range Capital Planning Committee today in Hamilton, Bob Woodbury. And that's a standing subcommittee, I believe, of 5 that's been established since 19. And they report to the Finance Committee and up through eventually to the Board of Selectmen, and they work with the town administrator. So I guess I would define this as an informal committee at this point. Is that, I mean, given that we don't have a bylaw, but we're going to kind of look this year. I'm just trying to organize for myself, maybe beginning an inventory between now and July, setting out where we are this year for capital, which we have to do every year anyway, and then kind of roll that forward at least for 5 years, which I think Jackie, I believe Jackie has begun to put that together, but
Yes, she did. So we have the CAP for FY22 ask, and I can screen share that. And then she's working on 5-year and eventually 10-year, but right now the 5 years we'll
Okay.
both be working on.
So we have some work that's been done already. Now, Jamie, did she do that in the context of working with department heads and getting the feedback from department heads? Are we duplicating what David or Susan or I would be doing, for example, or should we coordinate with Jackie?
Yeah, I think coordinating with Jackie would be good. I think that this was something that was started a while ago with the grant, right, with the Collins Center. And so I think it's been ongoing.
Yeah.
But I think now that we have even an informal committee, it would be good to get everybody in on it so that it's we're all looking at it and we all know what's coming, what's to come, what we can shuffle around and all that fun stuff.
I mean, for the financial planning, what Tom is saying, it really is a great tool.
Right.
Because you're not hit with any.
And there's no surprises, right? I'm going to know now for the most part what's going to come up in the next couple of years. So
Yeah.
on a financial
fire truck last year,
for me.
Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully.
I mean, the fire truck last year was it a bit of a surprise, Gary? I mean, I think it kind of.
I think from my understanding, it was a very big surprise.
It was a bit of a surprise with the cracked frame, right?
Yes. So, as was, some things you can't foresee, like that problem with the first ambulance. But certainly
right.
fire trucks and stuff, we ought to have, as Tom says, 20 years out, we know what the time is on fire trucks and big stuff like that.
Yeah, the ambulance, that ambulance is a good example of something that was the wrong fuel in a diesel. Was that a diesel truck?
Oh, no.
I can't remember whether it was a diesel engine.
I think it was diesel and they got, or was it regular and they got diesel? I think it was regular and they got diesel.
Oh, no.
I think.
But at any rate, that's something you can't anticipate. But the big capitalizing, and Susan, this falls into the DPW fairly significantly.
No, well, see, there is software that's available that isn't very expensive to basically you enter the vehicle, a serial number, even periodic oil changes, part numbers, the whole thing. So it will actually remind you if the 1 ton needs an oil change at a particular time. It's very helpful. But I think that things might get lost in a municipal setting as far as inventory, because you're not doing any depreciation schedules or fixed asset schedules, I don't think. So I think the tendency would be to just not inventory them. If people are short of time, it's generally the last thing they want to look at. And
Susan,
so-
can I just jump in for 2 seconds?
yeah,
So we do have fixed assets that we have to supply to the auditors at the end of the year.
oh, you do, okay.
Yeah, and to be right now, I can't tell you what that looks like.
Yeah,
But
no, that's fine.
when we do have a system and we do have a software, so that
Oh, all
does
right.
account for that stuff. Yeah, just
Oh,
not
okay.
even equipment like that, infrastructure and all that.
Okay.
It does anything over 10K.
I would
It's
think
up
you'd
for-
need it for insurance purposes and
Yeah.
stuff like that
Mhm.
as well. But, so that's great. I don't know, I keep, because I've had a love affair all my life with the internal combustion engine. I just keep looking at the DPW and thinking, those are things that generally you can plan for. And maybe it might make sense to share some of these things with Hamilton, equipment that's not being used on a daily basis and stuff like that.
Actually, Susan, we have done that in the past, generally on capital, and it's a little late here to work on this with Joe. Maybe next year, who's here can do that. But I've shared capital requests with other communities and likewise to determine if there's any equipment that is something that may be too pricey for us to purchase for the short period of time.
Right.
But for the other community between us, it's something like you were saying, is a shared vehicle or a shared item, particularly DPW. So that's something I would really look for who's ever here next year, beginning that process probably around September with Hamilton, and you may even look at Danvers or someone a little
Or
bigger.
Manchester or someplace. But the other thing is, I think I'm not sure there's a definition, and I don't really know it as to whose responsibility it is to look at like the Council on Aging building on a fairly continuing basis and see what would need to be done. And, if you spend $10 with preventative, you're going to save 100 down the line. That's my
That would
thing.
be generally the facilities director.
That's a good segue to my next kind of question or statement is, along with vehicles and major equipment purchases, backhoes and big trucks and so on, we have the facilities I'm saying this as a question. Do we have a facilities maintenance plan going forward, or have we inventoried all of our physical plant facilities and say, you know what, in 5 years, we're going to need a roof for the fire station.
Right.
or our town hall and our police station are going to be approaching 20 years old, and before we know it, that kind of a question.
See, it's very important because I inherited when I became the manager in Belmont. Within a 5-year period, we built 2 fire stations, 2 town halls, a council and a senior center. I may be missing a building there because it was not properly reviewed and maintained over the years. So that's what's very important here is that you maintain it. I had a floor collapse at the fire station, which made us eventually sell 3 fire stations to build 2 new ones because maintenance on buildings were not considered a major priority. And when you put that on the tax bill, and when you have literally debt exclusion for 5 buildings,
That's a big
in a
nut.
matter of 5 years, it's
yeah.
not good.
So we have in terms of capital equipment plus facilities would be rolled into any kind of a long range planning for any capital improvements, right? They both go down the same different tracks, in terms of how we gather data and gather information and inventory, but at the same time, we develop this plan. I don't know if Jackie has Jamie, do you know if Jackie has a facilities segment in her work at this point, or is it more equipment and vehicles? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I know there was some talk about like upkeep of the buildings. I know paintings on different ends and different times of the year, but I'm not sure how much more into it the 5-year plan is
Okay.
as far as facilities goes.
The other thing I don't know, I've been talking about this for 20 years, but the fire station, we keep paying more money for these custom built fire trucks because the doors are low. I don't know why we don't raise the roof on the thing. And it seems though it's costing us a couple $100,000 every time we buy a fire truck when we should just raise the roof.
I've been there, Susan. You're absolutely right. The
Drives me nuts.
The challenge is, my late father would have loved me to have been an engineer. I'm not, so I don't know structurally if the building can, what the cost would be, whether the building can actually do that. But that is
Yeah,
a very
Ken.
costly item.
No,
when
but
you have
it's
to
not,
custom build them.
it's not a couple $100,000. We've probably spent like $800,000 on these fire trucks that are shrunk because we haven't raised the roof. And I mean, you just, you do what you have to do. You put some steel in there, you get, it's not, it just makes sense to me.
Right.
And it's stuff like that, now we've bought another new fire truck.
The
And now,
challenge also, Susan, is it's in a historic district too.
Yeah, Catherine Tinsley just brought that up too.
no, I understand that. My husband was
I
on
said
the
it's a challenge. I didn't
HDC.
say it was an impediment.
I could not rationalize anybody saying you can't raise the roof on the fire station when we live with that dreadful post office day in and day out. And so anyway, I live with Mr. HDC, who was on during the whole town hall thing. And so he agrees with me completely. He keeps saying, why don't they raise the roof? Now it's going to come up someday is a new roof on the fire station. That's like a bozo no, because we got to go up.
Yep.
Well, I think what you're raising, Susan, would be a major component of our thinking on the facilities side of a long-range planning process.
But you can look at all of this stuff and things don't surprise you. And that's the advantage of doing something like this. And I'm thrilled that we're doing it. I think it's a wonderful idea on your part, Jim, to just get this thing together. I think in the long run, it'll be a better community and it will cost us less money.
I'm pointing to Mr. Cheeseman. Mr. Gary said, Jim, why don't we get
Another thing on the list, yes.
Oh, you did that? Oh.
But perfect example, and this is why I'm so excited about. I won't be here when you.
Now
do
let me
this.
throw a little curveball. That's not even a curveball. It's a knuckle sinker that's just going to come across the plate real low. We have in front of us both communities, a significant capital issue in terms of a new school.
Right.
How does, of which in our discussions the other night, it's probably, if it gets approved, SBAS, the School Building Assistance, owns about 40% and the communities own about 60%. I have no idea what we're talking about in terms of dollars.
Mhm.
But does that go into as well our capital planning process? It would seem to me we would have to take that into consideration as well.
It would. I don't know if you are at this point, but generally when you're looking at a new school and eventually going before MSBA, that generally gets worked into your capital plan.
Okay, so that's kind of like if you will, a third component. You got equipment, vehicles, facilities, and then I'd put the school, which they're talking about the other night, probably, Gary, wasn't it 4 to 5 years out at least in their discussion?
Yes, that long, but certainly Hamilton's already voiced the concern that given their need for a new town hall, that although we don't control the school capital plan, the three-party Hamilton Wenham schools really need to coordinate so that, everything doesn't hit in the same year. So yeah, we got to share that information around. all three long-range plans have to be coordinated, really.
And we won't know that, how to inject that or how to put that plan into place until we hear from, or it gets approved. If it doesn't get approved again for another year from SBAS, then we'll have to just work on our assumptions for our own town government. Is that a fair?
Well, I think that's so far out that, it's something that will just roll year to year until they get the approval. Then you can lock it in to all three budgets.
Then we begin to build it in. Okay, so it's 6:27. Folks are going to be joining us for the 6:30 FinCom. Just to kind of maybe wrap this up, and please jump in here. I guess the first thing we're going to do is coordinate with where Jackie's at in her 5-year plus planning. We'll see about an inventory process that's in place. We should think about a facilities inventory process. That shouldn't be too difficult, should it, Tom, Jamie?
Of facilities
Yeah.
inventory?
For Wenham, I mean, it's not like we have.
Facilities, I don't think as much as maybe equipment, and depending, sometimes you don't think of inventory and then you have all these things coming out of the woodwork that everybody's like, oh, we have one of these, so that depending on what we have on our fixed assets, most of it usually is on your fixed, it should be on the fixed assets. So I don't see it being, Tom, I don't know what your experience is, but I don't see it being a huge deal to get a list together.
But we should put that into the hopper of, considerations. Yep. I mean, we're doing the new roof and painting the Council on Aging building, I believe. At least that's in the planning process. But we have other things. We got the whole DPW buildings and so on. I have no sense of what I mean, they're fairly new, right? Gary, how old are those buildings? They're 10, 15 years old down there, something like that?
No, well, the original, the garage is what, I think more like 30, isn't it?
Yeah, it's old.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. But at any rate, we have these, but that should be part of it. So if it, David, Susan, would it be acceptable to you that I sit down with or talk with Jackie and Tom and Jamie about what exists, where we're going, how we do the inventory? And and for the two of you, please, I mean, because I have the library. That's the most on my side of it in terms of capital. Any information that you can collect and throw into this, it may be duplicative in terms of what Jackie has, but that's okay.
Now, what about, I'm probably really pushing the edges here, but what about the parks? They're talking about some sort of, they're looking at the West Wenham Playground and then Pingree Park. To me, Pingree Park could use a real kind of overview. I get frustrated. I take my granddaughter there and there's no real there somehow. And I'm wondering if maybe some capital expense couldn't be spent on the parks themselves. I don't know. I mean.
Well, that should be probably part of our consideration. Of part of the parks fit into any kind of capital investments.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't think of needing parks in Wenham, but when you have a toddler and COVID-19, she's 3, you kind of want someplace to crawl around on. And I looked at Patton, we go to Patton Park, and that's just a knockout. And then I go to Wenham and I'm thinking, geez, we really need to do something.
Yeah.
And the one thing, Susan, when you're looking at park, you can make it as a capital item because it will generally be above the threshold of $10,000 in 5 years life expectancy. But you do have to watch, particularly with parks now, is handicapped accessibility and making the parks, because that's fine and it's needed, but it does also add into the cost of it.
Jim, sorry to interrupt. I just want to let you know that we have people that are coming in for the 6:30 meeting.
I see that. So just to summarize this, I'll follow up with Jackie, Tom, and Jamie. David, Susan, if you could collect any more data, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. And we could kind of feed that in and begin to move this process along. The only other thing I would suggest, I guess to all of us and Gary, is do we want to think not about next week or next month, but in the future of making this subcommittee, adding to this quote subcommittee, other community members for input and just workload distribution. I mean, that might be something we should think about, and even doing maybe a bylaw or something like that,
Yeah,
memorializes this committee in a way that defines it.
If you
Jim, that
want,
would be I'll just say that now, the amount of conversation that went on in the last 30 minutes, I think we're biting off more than we can chew right now. So I think it's worth it's worth discussing at our next meeting, because
Okay.
we didn't even get to anything. We already got to parks and schools and new roofs and all that.
Right.
So yes, it would be my suggestion is we talk about it or speak about it later.
Okay.
Adding people.
Can I just say one thing? Tom, at the last selectmen's meeting, you put up a chart that basically said the capital expenses and if they're done. I think that's a great idea. That's a really, really informative thing to have. Thank you.
well, actually, thank your department heads who are on the board because they all responded to me today.
Oh, they
Very much
did?
with their updates. So they got back to me very quickly. So thank them.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. It was a really good graphic.
Okay. Let's see, who do we, Susan, David, Carrie, Jim, Alex. Hello, Alex.
Hey, Jim. Good evening. Hey, everyone.
Good evening.
Hey, Jim.
All right, I'm gonna call to order the full Finance Committee meeting for
I just have a
February
point of
3rd
order.
at 6:34.
A point of
And-
order, Jim. Do we
and
need
take
to end? Do we need to end the capital meeting first? Do we need to end that?
Yes, you're right, David. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, no.
I hear a motion to adjourn the Long Range Capital Planning Committee meeting.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
Okay. No other discussion? All those in favor of adjourning the capital planning meeting? Aye, Jim.
Aye, Susan.
Hi, David.
Okay. Okay, Catherine T., you got that for the record.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we'll call to order the full Finance Committee meeting for February 3rd at 6:30, and joining us this evening for an update on budgets. Bill Tyak, Mr. Tyak. Bill, thank you. Fire Chief, that's Mr. Kavanaugh, Chief Kavanaugh, and Chief Tommy Perkins, and Captain Kevin DiNapoli. Welcome, everybody. But first, before we do that, Mr. Cheeseman is going to make a brief presentation as to legislative action that he's involved with as a single selectman at the moment. Mr. Cheeseman, Chairman
Thank
Cheeseman.
you. So what we have tonight is just kind of an interruption to the FinCom meeting, that after consulting with the town council and Tom Younger, that we've proposed to put forward legislations. Will be going through the governor's office to the legislation that will essentially validate all the actions that may occur from 19 January until we get the special election and a quorum rebuilt on the Board of Selectmen. And the purpose for this is to, one, obviously this is a unique circumstance that we want to make sure that the movement to town meeting, the special election, and the annual election are fully validated, so that after the fact, no one can come back and say, oh, well, you only had one selectman, therefore the elections weren't valid. So what we propose to do is have a legislative act passed at some point this spring, and we already talked to Bruce Tarr and Brad Hill about this, that will essentially validate Wenham's actions under a solitary selectman, that will say that the town meeting, the special election, the annual election and other actions that occur during this period of time are valid. We'll also take a separate warrant article to the town meeting to also validate to say that the town accepts all the actions during this period. And the purpose really being to just validate that everything was done in accordance with the law, that the state primarily recognizes the elections and so forth to be valid. As we talked with our state legislators, they said one thing we really need is to, obviously we're competing with COVID and the budget and everything else in the legislature and the governor's office, so that they wanted a consensus from the town. And they suggested that we get each committee, each of the main committees, to send a letter into the town administrator to be gathered up and forwarded supporting this special act. And that I've sent out, or I think Nikki got out to your chairman, and we'll distribute it. There's a verbiage for the possible special act going to the legislature, and then verbiage for the possible warrant article. But what I need from you is from the finance committee as soon as you can to come together, look at those two things, and then send a letter, which we're drafting up a standard form tomorrow morning, that the finance committee chairman, after a vote from the finance committee, will say basically, yes, finance committee in Wenham supports going forward with this special act to the legislature. So that's where we stand on that. And I know the public will have access to that warrant and the act on the website and the committee. So at your perhaps next meeting, review it in the interim, and the next meeting, perhaps we can get a vote and get that into Tom if we could. Thank you. Any questions?
I was going to suggest, as you mentioned, Gary, that we do this at our next meeting, which I believe is the 17th. So you're going to send to me language for the supporting special act?
Yeah, so you should already have that went out this afternoon to all the committee, most of the committee chairmen. So it included a little explanation and then the actual draft prepared by town council for the act itself and also for the warrant article.
Okay.
And it should be going up on the website, if not now, tomorrow morning.
Okay.
All right.
So this will be sent to me, or has it been sent to all the finance committee members? Or
I
just to
think
myself?
just to you right now. So you may want to distribute it, or other members can look at it on the website.
Okay.
I just have one quick question, if I may. And
Yes.
Gary, that all makes sense. Thanks. Appreciate the transparency and, regular updates on how you're working through this. You mentioned special election. So is that a given at this point? Forgive me if I should
Yes,
know.
the warrant was signed Monday.
Okay.
So, and at last night's Board of Selectmen session, excuse me, we talked about Diane Bucco gave the whole list of dates. I believe February 18th is the last date to get your nomination papers back in, and you can make appointments to pick them up and so forth. And the election will be on the 8th of April at Town Hall.
Thank you.
And the next day, we should have a new permanent town clerk in place and the second selectman in place. So we'll have the quorum reestablished.
Thank you.
All right.
So, Gary, you don't need, I maybe misunderstood, but you don't need a vote from us this evening. We should have this language in front of us. We should review it and take a formal vote on the 17th.
Yes.
Okay.
And by that time, we'll have, excuse me, the formal letter instead of each committee and vetting the stuff. We'll have a standard letter for each of the committee chairman to sign, validating that they did have the vote and that they do support this going forward.
Okay, very good.
All right, thank you. I'm just listening in from now on.
Okay. Any other questions regarding that from any of the finance committee members? Okay, let's, I haven't open this up to any public input. With Chairman Cheeseman's declaration, do we have anyone in the queue with their hand raised? Jamie or Tom?
We don't, but if anybody wants to put public input, if you could just put your name in the chat box.
I see 2 in the chat room. Does that mean they want to chat, or are they just?
No, I think that was Catherine Tinsley was from our prior meeting, and then Carrie just thanked Gary.
Okay. All right, let's get into our agenda of financial review of the budgets, given that we have the chiefs and the department head. Bill here, I'll hand this over to you, Jamie, to move this forward and have some updates from the department heads and the chiefs.
Okay, so I think we should start off with fire. I'll have fire go first and talk about their department budget. Chief,
Sure.
which one do you want me to put up?
Let's do salary.
Okay. Hold on one second.
If there's anything on, I can't see anything. If someone's not sharing a screen, or I don't see anything. See the lovely chief's face.
Oh, I have nothing on the screen.
No. I thought someone was sharing a screen.
I'm sharing my screen right now. Hold on
okay.
1 second. It should be up in 2 minutes. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
That's expenses.
All right, here you go.
There you go.
And
All right.
Just a quick reference point relative to what we have. Is this the same as the hard copy of what we had from a while ago?
It's not. It was updated. So once he finishes, once the presentations are done tonight, I'll email everybody the spreadsheets.
Okay, thanks. That was my next question. I don't have a soft copy of this to look on, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No worries.
All right, so we'll start out with the 3 top salaries, the chief, deputy chief, and firefighter. That includes the FY21 merit, 2%, FY22, 2% COLA, and the longevity with the ending results of chief 116,967.23, deputy chief 111,541.46, and the firefighter at 57,435.69. Also have an administrative assistant, which is Sue Hersey at the police station. Equipment caretaker. That has that is for 2 people that work on Saturday for the taking care of the equipment, the small engines, and the fluids in the trucks and stuff like that. The EMT stipends for 18,000. That is for, that amount reflects that if every EMT makes 50% of all medicals, they receive a $900 stipend. And that would cover 20 EMTs. Part-time mechanic was moved to vehicles. Called deputy chief stipend with no COLA remains the same, $71.40.
What's the stipend for?
For the rank of deputy chief, they assume more responsibilities, and it's
And
part of
that's
their.
not-
Go ahead.
Okay.
No, it's
That's not
also
included in the salary?
no. That is called deputy chief. not the full-time.
Oh, okay, okay.
And
Okay,
there's
gotcha.
also a call captain stipend
Okay,
with no COLA of $4,080.
okay,
There's also lieutenant stipends, 5 of them at $3,500, which is contractual, for $17,500. Overtime wages, that is for 2 firefighters at the moment. It will be for 2 firefighters. One is for the full-time firefighter that responds to after-hour calls. We have to pay him time and a half. And also a highway worker, we pay time and a half for his after he works 40 hours for the town of Wenham. We are waiting for word on the labor board for a decision whether we can pay his time and a half through call wages, or we have to have a separate line item for overtime. All other longevity, which is the call firefighters, for that will extend up to 6,000. Training. With a 2% COLA, that'll be 33,698.53. Firefighter 1-2 certification, that's ×4. That's when a firefighter goes to the academy and obtains his certification of firefighter 1-2, successful completion. You will get a payment, a one-time payment of $1,500.
Excuse me, Chief.
Yeah.
On the back to the training,
Yes,
is that an FTE? Or is that paying for firefighters to attend training?
that is paying them to attend training.
Okay. So it's not we don't have an individual trainer doing that training. They go out to programs and training programs.
Yeah, we have to pay them. We pay them 2 hours a night. Well, we hold trainings the first Wednesday and second Wednesday with a split group. We split the department in half. And then the third time we meet, it's everyone. So everyone works together. And we pay them 2 hours each
I see.
for training.
Okay. I get it. Thank you.
Additional EMS coverage. That's for, the extra hours of cleaning the ambulance. Times where it's really hard to get coverage, like a holiday and vacation time, stuff like that. I mean, even cleaning the ambulance after the call, if it goes above the hour call, it can take up to an hour to really clean the ambulance, especially now with COVID, because we clean the cab and the back. We got to be real careful how we do it. On-call wages, including the call deputy chief. That includes a 4% increase. And that is the 4% comes from the, I lost my sheet here. The final total of 195,425.69. That represents a 4% increase over fiscal year 21 of call wages. And that's mainly based on contractual increases for the Wenham Firefighters Association.
I have a question. Sue Hersey, I understand, is retiring.
Yes.
And so the person, would you keep it the same person doing this as in the police department?
I'm so glad you asked that. Ultimately, I would like to return that back to the firehouse where we can actually put someone on for 5 hours a week. That would be really helpful to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's already in the budget. We could just absorb it back into our.
Susan, I believe Chief Perkins and Captain DiNapoli in their last discussion, and I suspect they're going to be reviewing that tonight, have proposed upgrading that position to a quote, I'm probably getting this wrong, but a confidential
Right,
executive assistant kind of position.
yeah. That you probably would need more than 26.75 an hour for. Is that appropriate to say?
Why don't we wait for them to present
Okay.
that piece? I don't have the answer to that, right? Let's let them kind of discuss that.
Okay,
Yeah, I think police is next, and I think that they have more information on that.
okay, thank you.
So Chief, just one question on the on-call. How are we tracking? How are we tracking when the firefighters, the on-call firefighters arrive, the time that, I understand there's a minimum amount of time that they're paid for on-call, but how do we track who shows up and, that kind of process? Given COVID, has there been some changes with that?
No, we have we are actually in the process because we had a hand reader and you had to touch it. We're in the process of installing a card reader where the firefighter holds a card where we don't have to touch it anymore. So, and we also track every call. You have to come in and you check your name in order to get paid. If you don't check it, you don't get paid.
Okay,
It
so
happens more than you think.
there's a trail,
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
a
Yeah.
very clear trail of
Yes.
who showed up and they get paid for X hour. Is it 4 hours, 2 hours? I can't recall.
Well, from 10 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning, it's a 3-hour callback. And if another one comes in, well, say during the day, one comes in, it goes your first hour and then it's 15-minute increments after that.
Okay.
I have a question, follow up on the on-call wages. So do you have a kind of a breakdown of how many on-call calls are made for 188,000 and what you expect the number to be roughly for 195,000?
We usually try and do for the amount of calls that we respond to, we try and do at least a modest 3% increase a year with all the new building and stuff going up. It reflects on how many more calls we're going to be going to, with all the new developments and everything. And it does affect the bottom line on the call wages.
Do you have like an average cost per call for the on-call wages? I just have no idea if that's sorry.
That is something I can get back to you on. It's it varies. Like at night, we can average $1,000 for so many people come out. And during the day, it's Jack, Jeff, and myself we're obviously salary. So whoever shows up after that can be under $100 a day if a call comes in each day.
Yeah, that's great. I'm interested in how many people are paid for how many calls to get to that number would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Medicals, we've been averaging 9.2 personnel per call. And we average over 400 medicals. So
do the call wages include the medicals?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's essentially the ambulance and the fire component of it. Is that correct?
Yes, it's both combined.
And what's the split?
50-50.
Yeah, it's about 50-50. I'd have to say a little more medical now to fire. Not much,
Yeah,
but
I would think that would have changed.
Yeah.
David, you have your hand up, David M.
Yeah, I'm on mute. Thank you. So, Chief, this goes along to the same things that we said before, was to follow up with the revenue. So a little bit of a backdrop. We've been working with the fire department for them to understand their needs and their capital grants. And I am getting some of the information that we spoke about earlier, Chief. But
Yep.
One of the questions that rose up as far as your revenue, and I think it just kind of coincides with the questions that are being asked now for reimbursement. So when you receive reimbursement revenue from Gordon College, how do they reimburse you? Is it by the number or type of calls, or is it per call?
That is per call. How many personnel were on scene or actually came to the call? And also we charge per truck.
Okay. Before I go into my next bit, Jim, I'll let everyone else ask their questions. And then if it's okay with you, Chief, I'll discuss our conversation from last week.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a quick follow-up from what David said. On the reimbursements from Gordon College, last year we met pretty late into the budget season, and Wenham had not been reimbursed yet. So I was just wondering, what's the timing for reimbursement for FY21? And did you get fully reimbursed as you requested for FY20?
Yes, Gordon did pay the bill in full. We bill them at the end of Memorial Day, so we bill them in the beginning of June, so they can also pay their bill before their budget closes also. So we usually get the check in June area.
Okay.
That check, if I remember, Jeff, was somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000. Is that right?
Last year it was a little low, yes, but you're probably pretty correct, right in that area.
Okay.
Normally it's been in the 60s for a year.
So are we covering our costs with what we bill Gordon?
Yes.
For the fire calls, yes. For the ambulance calls, they only pay for the guys that aren't on the ambulance, so we're getting 100% coverage from that. Because we also bill for the EMTs on the truck, and then the truck itself gets billed out separately.
Okay, so are we making a tad of money on them as far as the fire calls go?
The fire calls, we break even.
Okay.
Jamie? Jamie?
Yes.
What would be helpful with the on-call as well, just to put a little bit more meat on this, maybe we could do a year-to-date, July through January, of what we've spent so far, just to help us project forward. And the chief may and the deputy may find that useful as well, just as what kind of track we're on, you know, for that particular expense. The others are, I guess I'm going to say they're more predictable in terms of their monthly expenses.
Okay.
I want to say right now, we're actually probably 35% area left, maybe a little bit more for the on-call wages.
That meaning we spent 65% of the budget. Is that what you meant, Jeff?
Approximately, yes. We do track that.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. That'd be interesting just to see how you're doing with that.
If I can ask just a couple of quick questions, just with a focus on kind of year-over-year changes. I wonder, Chief, if you might help me understand. I think it's just two things I was curious about. Well, primarily on row 19, the overtime wages. If you could just elaborate on the additional firefighter added to line, which brings it from 23,300 to 40,000.
Yes, we have to have that. We have to have that in place prior to if there's a ruling from the labor board that we must take it from a line item of overtime wages to pay the firefighter that's on the highway department. We have to have that money available to pay him. If they tell us we cannot pay it out of call wages anymore, then we'll have to take it out of the overtime.
So I just want to, just explain on that. It's because the employees that are being paid on that line, they already work for us 40 hours a week. So anything over that they work for us is 40 hours. And I think, Tom, I know we discussed this a little bit. I don't know if you have anything to add, but that I think it's more because of the Fair Labor Standard laws and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, that's under the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA. If you have an employee who's basically working 2 jobs for one community and that their time is above the 40-hour period. There's ways that you need to calculate it based on what they're being paid for the 2 positions. And as the chief has stated, he's waiting for an opinion on that, on how we have to pay that. That's a challenge that you do see a lot more in smaller communities than larger communities where you have dedicated individuals in permanent roles.
Got it. So the 17,000 roughly accounts for the need to appropriate overtime for which this is a call firefighter, correct?
Yes,
As well as has another official position with the town.
yeah, he's a DPW worker.
Right. Okay. And so, okay, so it's not a shell game, but you have to account for it somewhere, and that's where it is for now.
Yes.
It's okay. And then one other quick question, Chief. Just other longevity, it's a small, 4,800. I would think that would go in like the longevity column associated with the staff line.
That contractual for the firefighters union.
We just keep it separate. It's not in with the full-time employees. That's just a different way of accounting for it.
Okay.
Because their longevity doesn't match what the town's is per their contract.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So it's a singular line item with the union versus a roll up of individuals, or maybe it's a roll up, but it's accounted for in one bucket.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. Thanks. Oh, and one more question, please, if you would. Where do we stand at the end of the fiscal year typically, or just generally, like anecdotally, with regard to the 900 per EMT for making half the calls? Like we appropriate 18,000. Do we typically expense all of it?
We do not. It's a last year, I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, 13,000, I think we expended.
It was about 13.5, but also we've added probably 4 EMTs, I think. Is that correct, Stephen?
Yes, yes.
So there's 4 more on our roster. So it's going to add a little bit into that, but that's probably worst case scenario.
Yeah, you have to have worst case scenario in case everyone does make it to 50% of the calls. You have to have that money there.
Thanks. And does unused stipends just go to where do those land? Free cash? I mean, we're talking small amount anyway, but
yeah, it would be either turned back or allocated for something else.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Chief, you're gonna continue to roll forward here?
Yeah, want to do expenses?
Yeah.
The energy services, there's a decrease in that for 7,752. We took the phones and the internet out of that line item and moved it to communications. Non-energy water service, that's 350. Office supplies, 3,000. That also covers maintenance of the fax machine, the copy machine. Maintenance and repairs to the building, anything that arises, any minor issues. Cleaning supplies, 600. Ladder certification. That's the yearly certification of the actual stick of the ladder and also all the ground ladders. That's done annually. Firefighter equipment. That's gloves and hoods. Fire prevention supplies. That's that item's in there for the fire prevention week, where we buy supplies for the when we have the open house for the kids at the firehouse. Subscriptions and fire codes. Those are the fire prevention code books. And any other code books that we might need. Uniforms. That's for any Class A's. Any of the badges, the collar pins. Also, when we hire, we've been trying to hire 4 new guys each year, and that covers the cost of their initial uniform, so they can have a uniform when they get here. Clothing allowance for the 3 full-time firefighters, that's contractual, $3,000. Protective gear, that's in there to replace any damaged gear in case something happens, either at a hazmat incident or a fire, something on or broken, what has to be replaced. Medical supplies, ambulance licenses, that covers all the cost for the licenses. Self-contained breathing apparatus, the 9,650, that covers the annual flow test, the hydro test for the bottles, and any replacement pieces. Radio maintenance and replacement, that's the replacement of any batteries or any damage that occurs to one of the radios. Dues and memberships, Massachusetts Chiefs Association, Essex County Chiefs, Fire Prevention Association, cleaning allowances, that's 28 firefighters times 300, and that's a contractual obligation of 8,400. Hazmat equipment, that would be 1,000. That covers like oil absorbent pads and speedy dry, stuff of that nature. Service pumpers, that covers both pumpers for service. With the new pumper coming, that is added in there also for 2,300 increase. Fleet maintenance, that's where the part-time mechanic position went over to here for a $12,000 increase. And that is to cover fire trucks are worked on. They have to have an emergency vehicle technician work on them. So that money will definitely come in handy to help pay for that. The rec additional cost, that was removed last year. Communications, that's all the phones. And that's also because all the copper lines are being removed, we got to upgrade the phone service. Fire alarm services, that's maintenance of the master boxes. ALS and ambulance billing cost, that's for year-end costs associated with the ambulance and the ALS service.
And why is that doubling?
Because of the payments, when you get insurance companies, when you bill the insurance company, it can take up to 12 to 18 months to get paid, and it may go into the next fiscal year. So we have to have money for that next year to pay that stuff back, to pay off the ALS billing, that the agreement that we have with Cataldo, and it's Jeff can probably explain a little better.
It's also going up because our run volume is going up, and we basically pay for our laptops and our Zoll system, which is how we document the patients and be able to bill out. The more patients that we do, the more in percentage. So we pay a 3% on each patient. And those bills have been going up again, just because our patient volume's gone up. And it also, like the chief was saying, at the end of the year, there's certain things that come back. A court case might have been settled, things like that, that we need money to be able to finish that out and not have vendors waiting for anything.
Okay, thank you.
Along those lines, so does the billing service, they receive a percentage of the bill?
Yes, they get, it's like 3%, I believe, off the top of my head.
I think it's 4% right now.
Maybe 4.
Yeah.
But anyways, we also did just increase our rates also, so we're going to see a little bit more money come back from that way.
On the margin, yeah.
The selectmen had just voted on that for us.
Okay.
So we're going to get that. Yeah.
I could see like I could see the cost of the actual runs, the amount billed to insurance increasing naturally, and the run rate, the quantity of those bills increasing too. Is there anything else? Like, is there equipment in there? Like you mentioned, like laptops. Is that something that gets?
The laptops are based in that 3 or 4% they completely service them. They give it to us. Not that we do it often, but if you completely smash one, they just hand us another one. So,
I see. So that's included in that
yes,
arrangement with the billing company.
yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
They also provide other things. We have like a third party that also oversees our service, and they give us monthly report cards, if you'd say, on how the patients felt about their service and everything. And right now we're somewhere between a 95% and a 99% that the public likes what we're doing.
That's
That's
good.
great.
Driving for 100.
Yeah.
Not far to
We'll
go.
never get there.
It's always 90% less percent. Just curious, how long is our contract with that billing company?
Until we don't want them anymore,
Yeah,
basically.
basically, yeah.
Okay.
They're at the top of the line. You can't get any better for a billing company than who we're with, just because of what they're supplying.
Yeah.
God forbid we have a code or something like that, they also send other documents on our behalf. They look at the whole thing. Through COVID, they've been tracking all our PPE we've been using. It's just an amazing service, honestly.
Great to hear.
Yeah.
And the revenue from that shows up in our
It shows up.
general fund,
Yes.
Yes.
but it's separated out, right? So you guys can track it.
Yep. For the most part, it's all separated out. Myself and Yemi, we go back and forth. I have one way of reconciling it, and they have the other side that they see as it comes in.
What do we develop a year approximately, Jeff, with that billing?
Right now, from the November of 19 through 20, that year, we brought in actual cash value was 158, and there's probably close to another 150,000 out there that will be coming in shortly.
Yeah, so
it does take time. Some of them court, they're involved in court or things like that just takes time for the billing to come forward.
We billed out about 296,000.
Yeah, so according, Jamie did run it for us, the estimated that she has from July 19 to June 30th of last year was $166,000. So I'd like us to discuss, I think, because we have a few years or 2 years of revenue now coming from the ambulance, that the fire department should probably have a small revolving fund to pay for some of the things they're asking here, similar to what we have with the cemetery and the water, iron rail, and things like that. That if there's a constant yearly income of $150,000 for the town from ambulance, and then we have the inspections and everything else, there's a portion of that revenue that could be used for the fire department itself to pay for these bills. I know that has to go to town meeting and be put on the warrant, but it's something we should consider and frankly do. I don't think, in speaking with the chief on that, obviously he's supportive of it, but in looking at it, I don't think it needs to be either the full amount, but there should be a small amount of that ambulance, since they're the revenue source, should go back to that and help pay for the things that are on this budget. I don't think that's a bad idea.
The only thing with that is that has to go to town meeting every year. And I think from discussing with fire, the way they were trying to use it is it's just not going to work. I think it was more of a, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but when little things arise to pay it out of that account, but that's not the use of it.
Oh, you're correct.
Mr. Chair, if I can make a clarification for that too, to add to what Jamie said. So we do have several revolving accounts, like the iron rail is a really good example. And we know that there's specific revenue that's going to come into that and be spent out of that. But the way the iron rail revolving fund is it's only a limited purpose. So right now we have that ban for the debt, and that's all we can pay out of that revolving account. Whereas when the expenses change every year of what we might put out of it, it won't be able to fall under the revolving fund laws. So, because for example, like I have a special revenue account for flu, but it's maybe $2,000 that I carry over in a given year. And I can't, like, I couldn't use it for COVID response this year. I have to use it every year for flu because it carries my insurance billing over, but it's such a small amount. Whereas fire is doing way more billing and way more volume than the Board of Health ever could.
So how do we make it that the fire kind of pays for its own bills then? Because if the ambulance is a revenue source to the revenue source, shouldn't we be able to use some of the expenses that are for some of the expenses here that are yearly?
So we do, because it goes into the general fund and all of these expenses get paid out of the general fund and we track them separately within the general fund. But once you take a department and start to piece away its revenue and expenses that are tied together, you start to create an enterprise fund, which is when a department is completely self-sufficient on their revenues and doesn't need the town at all. So it's a fine line with all these different types of municipal accounts. And, you know, Jamie can maybe speak to this better than I can, but the challenge is once you peel something away from the general fund for a department, it has to be voted by town meeting a certain way every year. And if you pull the whole thing out, it has to be completely self-sufficient. It's just a difficult interaction in municipal accounting, to say the least.
So is the water department an enterprise fund? It isn't. So do we have an example of an enterprise fund in town?
No.
We don't have any enterprise funds in town.
Okay.
What I did talk about with fire is that I would talk to other, I think the best thing to do is talk to other municipalities, especially municipalities that are comparable to us in size, and see how they deal with, if they have these issues and how they deal with it, as well as loop in our auditors from an auditing standpoint, what they think, I think is the best course of action.
Right, so how do we tell the fire department they can't get something if they're bringing in the revenue for it, right? So I don't want to put the chief in a bad spot, but I think that there's got to be a way to simplify this, and it doesn't sound like there is because of the way everything is. But if a department's bringing in revenue, I don't know why we can't. We have to figure out how to keep that revenue in there to pay.
So I think to your point, Dave, I would say that to your point, you know, inspectional services, we bring in revenue and that revenue is meant to cover our costs, but that's still coming into the general fund and going out of the general fund. You know, fire is a much bigger revenue generator than other departments, but you know, it's still coming into the general fund and going out to fire. Like what they are bringing in for revenue does not equivalent what their department expenses are. And so it gets difficult when you start to like tear different parts of their revenue and expenses away. If there is a year where their calls drop or something happens that we don't get the billing back that we need, even if it's in a delayed fiscal year, then the general fund is not there to support them without, like, it creates a structural issue in the general fund. So if you take out part of the revenue and then take out that part of expense that matches it, it's cycling over here by itself away from the general fund. So there's no general fund protection if there is a bad year or if calls drop or God forbid an ambulance goes down and we don't have another and there's a revenue gap, then that money is not going into that fund in that fiscal year. And then we have to figure out how to fund those things that the fire department is still going to need.
I've run into, oh, sorry, David, go ahead.
No, Tom, you can go on because I'm just.
Because I've run into this instance before with recreational revolving funds, where there's been some bad years where the recreation department did not pull in the money that they felt they were going to be pulling in the programs. And unfortunately, you start running a deficit with that, and you can't run that way in the situation. The fire department is more than just, I mean, the ambulance is the one that's bringing in the revenue, but their overall expenditures is much greater than just the ambulance. And so generally you have to look at all those funds totally into the general fund versus just as a revolving fund. And also if you set up the ambulance revolving fund, technically it should only be utilized for the ambulance. You can't be paying for firefighter salaries out of a revolving fund. When you have a revolving fund, you're supposed to be picking up all the salary that's based in that revolving fund, including benefits. So if a individual is getting health insurance, technically that's supposed to be coming out of the revolving fund also. So it's a straightforward, very limited area that you can expend it out of.
All right, so to go back to our 6 o'clock meeting, if the fire department need a new roof or a new truck, can the revenue be set aside to pay for it in future years?
You could do a special, like towns do have capital reserve accounts, but it's not just for fire. You know, it's a capital reserve account that the town feeds into every year by a vote of town meeting for capital in general, for a capital reserve, but it's voted by town meeting, similar to how we vote the water budget, where we put that 35,000 aside every year for their future infrastructure costs. The challenge is that because of the way our fire department was a fire department before they were an EMS department, their operation of ambulance and firefighting is so together that it's very difficult from an accounting point of view to pull them apart. Because, you know, if you look at that situation and you don't take into account the accounting laws and the Mass General Law, it makes all the sense in the world. You know, if you have a savings account, you have a checking account, and the checking account is revolving through your expenses and your revenues, and you're putting money aside so that when things happen, you know, the insurance billing doesn't come back. It's there. But unfortunately for a municipality, all of these public funds are still subject to the same annual town meeting rules that we've had to live with our other revolving funds. And as we talked about, I believe last week with the rec department, the Hamilton manages the rec department. They're in a better cash flow situation than we are. And the rec revolving fund is in a pretty good cash situation. But if it wasn't, then we would be in a really difficult position. And we still do have 2 rec employees who are not paid out of the revolving fund. The director and the one admin are paid out of the Hamilton General Fund, because we would be putting those people's livelihoods at risk if there was a bad year for rec. So it's only those seasonal employees that we need if we run certain programs that are paid out of that revolving fund because of that specificity. But if we have a bad year like we did with rec this year, there's never a circumstance with the revolving fund being too low or running a deficit that it's going to impact the Hamilton and then our general fund, because we're still building those primary like salaries into the Hamilton operating budget and into ours through our assessment.
But I think Hamilton had to go back to town meeting for $804 or something, just because of what you were saying. I mean, they're just
for the sake of moving our meeting along, could I suggest that possibly minimally we have acknowledgement and a spreadsheet that shows the revenues that come in from the fire department, not necessarily that they be allocated to a revolving fund, but acknowledging and tracking the revenue that they develop as a contribution to the general fund.
I think that would be great.
Yeah, the host muted me, so I think that's a good. We can move on.
David,
I mean, we want to. They track it anyway. Let's acknowledge it and not offset their costs or pick up any capital at this point, but just to acknowledge what they're generating there. I'm trying to move the meeting along. At 7:30, we still have police and Bill and DPW. Are we, Chief Kavanaugh? Are we finished here for the most part?
We just have emergency management for 3,000, the fitness program for 400.
Yeah.
And training expenses, which is
Okay.
for outside instructors and supplies for any of those classes that we might have, a specialized class.
Okay, and Jamie, and I'm just trying to reconcile this page with the very initial page that we were handed out. The two don't tie together. They tie together a little bit. So this page.
Oh, the one that you have.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even
Yeah,
reconcile
don't even look at it.
Don't look
send
at it.
this
All right,
one
I'm
to
gonna
you.
tear it out of my book.
Yeah, don't look
But
at
I
it.
am seeing this page had about a $216,000, and this is at least 150,000. Is less than that original.
Yeah, there was formula errors, and yeah, it was
Yeah.
a nightmare. So this one, I'll send this one
So
out.
that's been addressed, and we've corrected the line items and the costs associated with these supplies and overhead.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from finance for the fire department at this point? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief Perkins.
I'm gonna
You're
start
gonna
screen sharing.
You're gonna go to police next?
Yep. Jackie, can you jump on with police, please?
I'm just waiting on the chief. I think he wanted to hear questions first, and then he was going to let me know what slide he wanted.
Okay.
Just try to get a feel for whether you guys want us to go through the whole budget again, or were we just talking capital? What's your pleasure? I'm fine, anything you want.
Why don't, this is my suggestion, Chief. Why don't we discuss any changes in the budget that was presented at our very first round? Why don't we highlight those? I think, any changes in the capital requests. So let's do it on if this is okay with the committee, let's do it on a variance basis. What's changed since the first time around, and how does it affect the bottom line? That's at least some place to start.
Okay, that sounds good. I guess then just the salary page first, Jackie. We really don't have very many changes at all. I'm glad to report. On our salary page here, the only two changes between last year's budget and this year's budget are the 11th full-time patrol officer, which we have listed there as patrol number 5. Obviously to be determined as far as personnel goes, for a total of $69,174, and that's a zero net increase because we actually transferred that money out of our salary reserve budget, which we were using a combination of overtime and reserve officers to backfill the coverage already. So the reality of this is it's not an increase in the department size. We're actually looking to downsize the department, if anything, and have less part-time officers. To be very specific with that, it's through attrition. We're not looking to terminate anyone as a result of this, but we do have some officers aging out, and we have 2 unfilled positions right now. So there would be at least a decrease of 3 reserve officers almost instantaneously. The other increase, well, yeah, not an increase, but the other change from last year's budget would be that of the executive assistant, which you guys touched on during the fire chief's budget. And what we're looking to do with that, and this is more a recommendation from the town than the police department, the last 3 town administrators we've had have all recommended this action, that when this position does open up, which is currently a AFSCME union position through a couple of town hall personnel and the DPW, to change that and remove it from the union and make it a confidential assistant to the chief of police. It's wording, it's more, a lawyer could probably explain the technical part of it better than I, but it would remove that position from the union, and that would take negotiation. But what we're trying to do with it, and this is after talking with Jamie and Jackie and Tom Younger, is try to expand the position to have a strong IT background, a strong human resource background. You only have to watch the news every 10 minutes just to see law enforcement is changing by the minute. The reform bill is going to take on a magnitude of change that I can't even imagine at this point. Deputy Chief DiNapoli is most likely going to have to dedicate a full-time person just to compliance to try to keep up with the changes in that reform bill. So having somebody in that position with a strong HR background would be a great asset. Those are the two specific changes to our salary.
Just a quick question, and other FinCom members. The change in that position, Chief, to an executive assistant is, if I'm reading this spreadsheet right, it goes from 72,000 to 75,000, 72 current salary. Is that correct?
No, that's what the starting would be. So the position right now.
Where are we now?
The salary right now, if I was at my desk, I'd have that, but
I think it's 2462. If it's the same as Sue Hersey was being paid for the fire department.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the area of 55,000.
65-ish?
55-ish.
55, okay.
And I could definitely get you an exact figure on that.
Okay.
I do think, just for completeness of year-over-year change, if that could be a separate row, zeroing out in 22 with the addition of this row without, I think, if I'm understanding it correctly, because like sorry, but what is the 40,000, excuse me, the 40 hours at 72,000, that's the net new position, right?
Correct. And the way it's structured right now, and that's what Chief Kavanaugh was trying to allude to, her salary is basically split where we pay 9/10, they pay 1/10. And she does some of the billing for the fire department right now. They're looking to get their own individual person there. So when we budgeted this for this position, we did it at 40 hours instead of, I think it's 35 currently. We pay for 35 hours, they pay for 5.
So this position will still have 5 hours with the fire department at this point? Is that the way it's structured?
It could. That's a policy decision. So we budgeted for the full 40 because I was under the impression that they were going for their own individual person. But again, that's totally up to the
I don't think that was in the fire. Did I miss that, or Jamie, is that in the fire department budget? I didn't see it.
No, it isn't.
Right. I think we need to add it there. And I'm sorry, I'm so slow here to catch on. But if we pay 35, if police pays for 35 hours, right? Currently.
Correct.
So I would think we'd want to show like weekly hours of 35 for the current in FY21, within this new position with 0 for FY21, and then the FY22. Because then it would net out the difference, right? Because we wouldn't have the current position, but the new position, if possible. I think it's just a minor tweak. It's just sort of adding one and then changing this existing row.
But the problem is, in the fire department's not going to have.
I think we're rated, right?
Yeah, can I just jump in for 1 second? I think fire said that they have it on their budget, but I don't think they have the intent of using it as it's been used all along, especially now with the change. And I think for them, it would be more beneficial to have somebody dedicated 5 hours a week to be in their building and help them on that end. And I think the intent was to have the confidential secretary be just police. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay.
So whether that changes or not, it is a policy decision, but I think for all intents and purposes for the budget, right, to get budgets approved this way, I think that's what the intent was it. Well, that's what the intent is. As far as the salary, the person retires in May, so that needs to be approved in May or June. The new pay does, sorry.
So we're suggesting to keep the 40 hours currently in the police budget?
That's what we're hoping for, yeah, is to keep this budgeted at 40 hours for us, and then fire has their own line item where they would get a different individual.
Separate from this. So in essence, we'd be adding about 5 hours at $34 an hour, $155 a week.
I think they budgeted it at a lower rate. I think they budgeted it at the existing rate.
At
Right.
$24.62, I think was $10 lower.
Right.
Yeah, I think fire budgeted it at what it's currently, and for the type of position that they're looking for. I think for police, it's going to be a totally different thing now.
Okay.
And we did base this on the town's classification study. We didn't just pick a number out of the air, so we did work with them.
Chief, can I remember too that we did include the job description for the proposed new position in the binders for the January budget day, so that folks could see what the new job description, the proposed job description, looks like for the policy side of it.
That should be in your packets.
It is in the packet. There's a full description.
And it would be a non-union position? Sorry, my last question.
That's the goal of it, yes.
And
We
then
haven't gone through that process yet, but that is the intent.
like you would have to work with the union upon retiring of the current position, which is union, to remove it from the union arrangement. If
Correct.
successful, then you would pursue this.
Yes.
Thank you.
So at the end of this, Jamie, we'll have to make an adjustment for the fire department budget for those 5 hours at $24 an hour.
What do you mean? Make an adjustment to this
Well,
amount?
because hypothetically, if we keep the 40 hours in with the police department budget, that means the fire department will not access any of these hours from the police department. That's my understanding, if I followed the conversation correctly.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. It's going to be two separate people
Right.
and two separate
Does that mean
positions.
we need to add, I don't know, let's call it $5,000 or so to the fire department budget for those?
Nope, they have it in their line item.
Oh, they do?
Yep,
They
they
have
do.
5 hours,
Because they
yeah.
normally pay when that person was
I
paid.
missed that. Scratch my comments. I missed that. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, Chief, anything else that you'd like to go over that's a change?
No, we do not have any additional changes. Our capital remains the same with one frontline police car and one administrative police car. And then if you recall, last year we need to upgrade our patrol rifles or replace them. And we did that. We did half of them this year, and we've actually placed the order. We're waiting on delivery, and there's $7,000 in there to replace the other 6. So other than that, our budget does remain the same.
Now, was I reading it incorrectly that you don't have any money in there for lifeguards and gatekeepers?
Oh, thank you.
Nope, that is in there.
There's $2,500 in there, right?
Around that figure. I think it's 22 or something, but
It was in your budget. Well, the reason that number is in my head, Chief, is there has been a question that was raised to Mr. Cheeseman from Regina Baker as to our plans this year. Does that thank you for raising that, Susan, by the way. Does that $2,500 cover our costs for the Pleasant Pond operations?
it does. That's one gatekeeper and one lifeguard.
Are there always 2 people on duty at the same time? Because that was a concern you had last year, if I recall.
That's correct. Yeah, I personally can't feel good about signing off on one person being down there by themselves. It's far too
Right.
rural, far too wooded. If any of you are familiar with the Molly Bish story,
Yeah.
you know, exact same scenario, and the young girl was kidnapped and taken off
And-
into the woods and killed.
And we do collect some revenue on the, who tracks that revenue for the stickers and so on? What are we looking at?
We track it internally, and this year, of course, it was zero. So I don't have it at my fingertips. I can get
Right.
that very quickly for you tomorrow, but I have all my other revenue reports, but that one there, we didn't take any money at all over the summer. So,
But that's fine. I mean, it's modest, but we do get some revenue for it.
we do. If I had to hazard a guess, it's $4,000 or $5,000.
Okay, well, you know, if it costs us 2,500 and we're covering our costs, certainly.
Well, no, it's
No.
22,000 for salaries for the beach. It's about 2,500 for expenses.
One more time now?
Salaries, the staff, the beach is 22,000. Then it's an additional 2,500 in expenses.
No moneymaker.
No.
No.
22,000 for the salaries.
Yes,
I guess I missed that one too. So is that in our budget?
it is. Yep. If you refer to the salary reserve sheet, which is the blue one, down near the bottom, under administration, you'll see gatekeepers and lifeguards, and it's $22,040.
Why is the police department in charge of the gatekeepers and lifeguards?
Well, I was the new guy and inherited it.
Okay, but it's not the way it should be, is it?
I think we've suggested moving it to the rec department, and we are not the lead on the rec department. And so I think Hamilton, correct me if I'm wrong, prefers having it in the Wenham Police Department rather than shifting it to the rec department. Is that correct?
That's as accurate as anything else. Historically, it has been bantered back and forth to go to the rec department, and Hamilton doesn't seem to have a great interest in it. I'm afraid if they pull back, and this is just my opinion, but I have not only worked here a long time, I grew up in this town. I think that if Hamilton pulls back and all of a sudden the Hamilton residents aren't coming to there's going to be some upset people, but that's their decision.
So functionally, it makes sense, in my opinion, for it to be in the Hamilton Wenham Rec Department. And, you know, functionally having an affordable recreational opportunity for Hamilton and Wenham residents, I also think is really important.
Traditionally, it's far more common in a rec department than a police department, but you know, we've.
I think in reading, if I may, if Regina Baker sent a very long, a very good note to Gary Cheeseman outlining from 2003, I believe, I don't have them, to the current time. And evidently, and Chief, you know this quite well, I'm sure, growing up in town, there's been a history of at Pleasant Palm Beach of a whole range of different issues. And we've had some years we had, as this started, we had lifeguards, then we didn't have lifeguards, we didn't have gatekeepers, then we had gatekeepers, and it's gone back and forth. And then we had that tragic accident on Pleasant Street, what, 5 years ago now, 7 years ago?
15.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
The lady that was gardening?
So
Is
I
that
think
right?
I think in part the history of this relates to the problems that police would in fact respond to.
That's correct. I mean,
at Pleasant
I can't
Pond.
explain why it is such a hot spot, but I can remember being an auxiliary police officer and writing out 75 parking tickets on Pleasant Street just because of people parking everywhere to go to Pleasant Pond. And they were from everywhere: Lawrence, Roxbury, Tewksbury. I mean, you wouldn't believe where they come from everywhere. But it has gotten much, much better over the years. It's far more controlled. The town used state money way back in the 70s to improve it, and therefore they can't limit it to residents only, but what they can do is limit the parking to residents only. So that's essentially what we've done. It's made it far more organized. And you know, the system really does work right now. The town doesn't spend a ton of money on recreation compared to some places. I know that the joint program, we absolutely kick into that a lot, but this is definitely something that the neighborhood wants. And I can tell you from a great deal of experience, you will hear from these people in force about their beach. They love their beach, and they want to be able to use it.
Susan and Carrie, coming from someone who's managed a couple of beach communities, you are correct. Generally, the lifeguards and any other type of personnel associated with that falls under the recreation budget. Here, it's more of a challenge because of having the recreation department merged with Hamilton, and Hamilton being the lead community. It's a little more challenging, but the lifeguards have been in the recreation budget in any other personnel associated with that. So you are correct.
Truly, it's a bit of a nightmare for us with our accreditation status. Accreditation isn't fond of the police overseeing lifeguards and gatekeepers. We've explained it the same way we've explained it tonight, and we've made it work, but at least from an accreditation state, you'd make the accreditation manager a lot happier if we weren't managing.
How much do we charge for the passes? Just wondering.
It's $25 for one, and then I think it's an additional $5 for each vehicle.
Yeah,
after
that's
that,
basically the same price we charge in Swampscott for beach parking passes.
yeah, there was some talk of raising it to try to collect a little more revenue, but again, policy decisions. So
I've raised it in the past.
yeah.
So in the past, just FYI for the committee, thanks for pointing out, Tom, that I didn't, Chief, that I didn't have the salary and wage.
No, that's okay.
But in the past, Hamilton would share these costs with us.
Yes, and my understanding is as of last year, they weren't interested in doing that anymore.
And that's.
I don't know how that's going to work when Hamilton residents want to come down there and park, though.
Well, we had that joint meeting with the FinCom, and we raised this issue with them, because what we understand is they want to pull out of that agreement. I don't know if it's a written agreement. Is it a written agreement that we have with them, or?
I believe it's at one point it did get reduced to writing. It's
Yeah,
not part. Okay.
It is written.
It what, Jackie? It is? It is a written agreement.
It is.
It is. So they have to go back and discuss this with the Board of Selectmen and make a decision whether they want to pull out. But at any rate, we have this in our budget. The full costs are $21,000 for the gatekeepers and the lifeguards, and $2,500 for expenses.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm not sure why I feel the way I do. I'm feeling because of the history, because of that tragic accident, because of the potential for that beach to, even with the gatekeepers and the lifeguards, it feels to me that we still have to have a presence, a police involved presence there. I know it creates a headache for you in terms of accreditation, but it has the potential for, being.
Oh no, it's so secondary to the gatekeepers and the lifeguards. We have directed patrols, which basically are checkpoints that officers have to log in that they check. And the town beach is at least 2 times a shift, and that's this time of year. So, and
but during the summer and spring,
yeah,
and
they
check that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that, where it belongs in a budget is to be continued. Whether it's here in the rec department. But if it's in the rec department, then we get into the discussion with the rec department of shared costs again.
Right.
The 64-36 formula or whatever the exact numbers are. So that would kind of and if they don't want to participate in that because of the town pool, that I'm assuming that is partly drives their decision. That that creates another discussion if it's in the rec department.
Right.
So, okay. Regina Baker's letter was not asking, I should share that with you, Chief. It was a very nice compilation of history, what's happened there, where they are now. They have an organized, incorporated association.
Oh, I'm very familiar with them. I actually did get a chance to skim the email just before this meeting.
Oh, you did? Oh, good.
And she even asked me to weigh in on any other historical data, and I don't think a historian could have done a better job than she did. So
she wasn't, if I remember, I read it just before this meeting too. They weren't asking for anything particularly. They're just kind of updating us and probably wanting to know the status going forward.
they want to, they want to make sure that it's funded, I believe, because last year it was definitely targeted as one of the cuts. And with COVID, we wound up just closing the parking lot, which means we didn't need to staff it, but we still had a handful of issues down there, mainly because it was unstaffed. We had weekends where the patrols were down there nonstop. I had to put extra people on just because of the beach. So my opinion would, in some form, definitely keep it staffed. This is the formula that works. We built it up over years, as Regina discussed. You know, we don't think we're heavy on personnel. I would not have only one person down there. I fought to get lifeguards. You could definitely save some money. And from what the town's attorneys weighed in on last year, you could do 2 gatekeepers and not have a lifeguard down there. But my personal humble opinion is, if you're paying people to be down there anyway, one of them ought to be able to save a life. Definitely one of the things that either I or Chief DiNapoli, as soon as he takes over, will definitely be coming to you with, is every year we try to change 1 or 2 of the rules. We try not to do it too often. But, you know, one of the things that we ran into the year before last was parents dropping young kids off down there, and the lifeguards were like, this is not daycare.
And the parents leave?
Yeah, they leave. And, you know, the lifeguards are like, we can only pay attention to the water if the kids are horsing around behind us. So we're going to, I've checked into it. Officer Sanborn, one of our reserve officers, is also in charge of the rec department over in Danvers. He's a great resource. They have a policy of, you know, any child under 13 has to be accompanied by an adult. So we'll come up with something like that, and that should help the problem.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Any more updates or any other questions from the Finance Committee or additions from Jamie or Jackie or Tom?
I'm all set.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Catherine.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Bill. Sorry to keep you waiting all this time.
Poor Bill.
All right.
Okay, how would you like to proceed, FinCom? Questions? Any variances from the last report? Do you want to go that kind of direction? Capital updates, variance, operational cost updates?
No, I think that that budget has been redone as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Why don't we approach it then with what the changes have been since the last presentation?
Sounds good.
Bill, do you want your budget screen shared?
Please.
Jackie? Okay.
I'm sorry, Jamie and Bill, we're using the January 27th, right? That's where we're at?
Yes.
Thank you. This is it.
All right, this is somewhat a new budget. It's broken down a little bit differently. FY20s are not accurate. I don't know what happened there, but as you can see, the only change to my budget, the contract services went down, as well as the MS4 permitting. Now, I lowered the MS4 permitting $10,000, mainly because now that we're not doing a loose leaf pickup, we can do so much more in-house. That's mostly inspections sampling the outfalls, manholes and catch basins. And it's quite time consuming, and the time of year to do it is the fall. So that helps us a lot. The only thing I went up on was a little bit on the telephone because the cell phones have gone up quite a bit. And as you can see, we're down $10,295 total, 5.5%. All the line items pretty much speak for themselves. Gas and oil is a little confusing. That right now is strictly gasoline and diesel. And motor oil and that sort of thing is under vehicle maintenance. Electric is strictly what it says, contract services. There's not a lot of them. And I mean, postage is no, miscellaneous is no. Street maintenance is the other big one. And we also have street capital, which the $65,000 is mostly for maintaining what we have. The capital supplements Chapter 90 money when we have a large project ongoing or we're redoing sidewalks. But as far as the budget, I don't know if there's any questions or should we move on to?
Could you show that, could you go back to that slide again, just for my clarification? Bill, on the salaries, it shows a 0% increase in salaries. Can you just discuss that for a moment?
I have no idea. I don't do the salaries. The only thing I can say on salaries, it's all contractual, and it did go up. If you look at the salary sheet, you'll see what it went up.
Jim, the FY21 total is pulling the wrong formula. So the fiscal 22 number is correct, but the formula is pulling the same number for both. So if you hold on a second, we'll fix it.
Bill, can I just ask a quick question? So I understand the MS4, the stormwater permitting went down a little bit, that which we have to contract out to, I guess, Winston and Sampson.
Yes.
Your crew can do the outfall sampling, stuff like that. Was there also like some other work that you thought we could save on by not contracting out as much, like street, like crack repair, stuff like that, that I think the crew was obviously so busy with the loose leaf pickup for so long that there was some other work that might have otherwise been outsourced?
Well, it's mostly catch basin repairs and the MS4 permitting is most of it. I mean, we have to stop crack sealing. We do that in-house. We have our own crack sealer. We bought with Chapter 90 money. And there's many paving projects that we had to put off because we had to start the loose leaf pickup. We can pave it to the end of November, but we're not able to because the first day of November we start the pickup.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't so much savings we would have achieved through stopping the loose leaf on that front. It was just getting more work done, so to speak, because we could.
Absolutely. I mean, it gives us 3 more months to get things done.
Did that play out this year, just anecdotally? Like,
oh, absolutely, absolutely. We got a lot cut up on a lot of tree work and some paving and some sidewalk work and a couple of catch basin rebuilds, which we're still way behind on that, but we will get caught up.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions. One, I'm not wearing my glasses, so I can't exactly see, but what I can see, I don't see on the spreadsheet. But Bill, did you talk about you were having a challenge finding someone to do in-house maintenance or fill a position?
3 positions, actually. We lost 3 workers last year who left for more money at other towns.
So yeah, I just wanted to get a kind of an update on what the status of that is and what the challenges are finding someone to fill those.
Well, we finally found some. 2 of them started November 30th. Mm-hmm. The other one was shortly before that. They're still under probation. They don't all have their licenses. We're training them. But when we were looking, it took from pretty much May until November to find a heavy equipment operator who had experience. Nobody was applying. Mm-hmm. And I believe that a lot of it has to do with when we didn't have the salary survey, we're not paying what other towns are. Mm-hmm. And so we couldn't attract anybody. And so even the people I did start, we had to pay at the top of the pay scale because nobody would consider anything less than that.
And so those salaries for those people that you hired are rolled in and built into this FY22 request?
Yes.
And they're,
Not
are
new
they-
salaries. It's what's in the AFSCME contract is how we budgeted. A 2%.
I'm sorry, did
Cost
you
of
say
living.
they are now more competitive salaries or they're not?
No, we never had a salary survey. We never increased anything.
Okay. And when you talk about salary survey, is that part of that broader Wenham-wide salary survey that's been proposed?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that information. And then did you get I got a lot of personal negative feedback about the loose leaf pickup. And I was just wondering if DPW got much feedback from the town.
Not really.
And it's not funny. I appreciate the people's concerns and the challenges that were presented. So I apologize for laughing.
Well, no, I know. I've heard good and bad. Some people can't believe we did it for as long as we did. And some people, most of the people who have no place to put their leaves were upset. And, it's one of those things that, do we get more done? Or if it's that important, do we do the loose leaf pickup? We could do either. We still have the equipment. It's a matter of what the selectmen and the finance committee decide. It can be done. Yes, it's the will of the people.
Yep. Okay, I was just curious because it does seem like the numbers bore out where you got significant time freed up to do other things like this MS4 permitting.
Well, it's also, I've got this, we're short, we have less people now than we did in 1990 with one cemetery and not mowing the schools. And so, we're dealing with that. We're getting everything done and then some. I just think it's really hard because it takes the whole crew through all of 3 months. And we had to pay to have people do the parks and the cemeteries. Myself and my foreman pretty much did ourselves, but the rest of it, we had to hire out to do that. This year we did everything in-house.
If I may say, though, the town really looks good, Bill. When you drive over the line, you can tell you're in Wenham. It really, I think this thing that you're doing, we're having people somehow subsidize these islands and stuff. It was a really good move. It looks really good.
Thank you. I agree. And, we've got some good people maintaining them.
So now are you fully staffed?
We are at the moment, yes.
And are people happy?
For the most part.
Okay.
It's tough to have new people. We're training and I've only got a couple of guys who know the drill and it's hard. Every snowstorm, they're learning. And there's the Wenham way and my expectations are higher. So it's a learning experience for them and it's hard to be patient, but I'm doing my best.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question on the, Bill, this isn't necessarily to you, although Tom, Jamie, Jackie, are those positions included in our study of wage and compensation?
They will be. All union and non-union positions are going to be included in the currently proposed salary study. The union that serves Bill's department, AFSCME, as well as the other two, are up for contract renegotiation for fiscal 23. So once the new administration is in, we will see that person start to work on that this fall, so that we're ready for the next year's budget process. So it would be, I think the goal will be, is if that's funded by town meeting, to have a contractor lined up so we can hit the ground running July 1 when the funds are available. Because whoever's going to be negotiating our new contracts is going to want that data, and that's going to be a really critical factor in our success for that process.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie.
So on salaries, as you can see, myself and my foreman are the only non-union personnel. So that includes a 2% merit and a 2% COLA over last year, which the merit is based on our performance reviews. And all the AFSCME people are getting a 2% cost of living raise. And the leaf pickup is gone for the help, and the summer help is, let me look at my sheet. Summer help is $6,103. That's for mowing, but actually I keep somebody on more than mowing to do some other things when when we're shorthanded or covering for vacations. But what I'm using right now is a retiree for 19 hours a week, and he helps mow all the schools. And the summer help at the COA is a retired gentleman who's been doing it for over 10 years. He just mows the COA and does yard work over there. That's what that $1,272 is.
Now you
Over
say
to-
all the schools. What do you do any more than Bessie Bucher? What do you do?
We do all 3 elementary schools and the athletic fields behind the high school. Hamilton used to help us, but they backed out 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, what's wrong with this picture? Why is that? That doesn't seem fair.
Well, they took too much of their time and they had other things that were more important to them. And it does generate revenue. It generates between $16,000 and $20,000 a year. I haven't asked for a lawnmower or any equipment for 15 years now. That's the only good part. But if you ask me personally, I'd love to have those. I'd love to have those hours back to do paving and other projects.
Yeah.
But it saves the school district a ton of money.
Are the
And they
rates,
know it.
yeah, like I was going to say, in terms of competitiveness of the rates, I think you're suggesting the school gets a great deal, which it's not that we wouldn't want them to get a fair deal, but do we revisit that arrangement? Like in terms of.
I totally agree. In fact, I think they're taking us for granted. When we did the 3 elementary schools, and then they asked us to please do the athletic fields because we've got a huge mower. And they put it out I said, well, let me know what you get putting it out to bid. They put it out to bid, and it was something like $1,500 a week. We charged them about $100 a week. So there's serious savings there.
Where is that arrangement maintained, and where was it established, and how is it revisited? I mean, I accept that it isn't regularly revisited, but.
There is a contract signed by the selectmen and the school committee, and it just tells the work that we do and kind of expectations. And it's never revisited, and all they're paying is time and materials.
And now who plows the schools?
We plow Bucher, and Hamilton plows all the other schools, except for the high school is private contractor plows it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Just a quick question, Jamie. On this particular spreadsheet, the total is 592. How does that compare to the prior year? I don't see it on the.
I don't see prior year on this.
No,
Jackie,
that's what I was just trying to.
Jim, on this slide, I put in that correct figure. So you can see for FY21, Bill's salary line was the 582,044. That's what we voted in July at town meeting.
Okay.
So it's about a $10,000 increase for next year.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, so that accounts for the 2% here and the modest
Correct.
salary changes, 10,000.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
And also, I want to add that the overtime wages is $13,362. The only thing we have is 4 hours a month for recycling at the highway garage. Everything else is for emergencies like a hurricane or, the trees come down and we have to work beyond the 8 hours or a Saturday. It rarely happens. And I don't give out overtime. We get most of that back every year. We've never used it all up. And the only time we came close to using it was when we had that microburst about 15 years ago, and it was a good 3-week cleanup. But other than that, that usually gets turned back.
I can tell you, Jim, that's a minimal amount that Bill's putting in there for OT. So
yeah,
you should feel really pleased with that number.
Okay. Bill, just as an FYI, and you probably heard, as part of what we're trying to do is a forward-looking for capital. 5 years, 10 years. Jackie's been working on this, but we're going to try to pull that together. So Susan, I think, has maybe had discussions with you already, or may be having discussions about forward-looking down the road for capital and equipment, and also facilities. Throughout the community, of which we have responsibility for. Trying to do a
Yep.
forward look on what facility costs may be coming up. Would that be part of your
Yes,
overview and oversight and trying to take a
Yes.
look at that as well?
yes, it has been since I've been here. We
Oh,
have a
okay.
facility director and he's learning, but I've been taking care of the capital needs for facilities.
Okay. So and I'm not asking for a number or anything like that tonight. I'm just saying, as we look forward, we'll be asking you for some help with that,
Sure, absolutely.
with the
is there-
facilities director and so on.
Are there any capital,
What's coming up 10 years or 5 years to 10 years down the road?
Well, we've got some roofs and mostly painting. There's nothing huge. Nothing out of the ordinary. We used to have a 20-year plan.
Well,
It included
maybe we
everything.
need at least a 10-year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was okay with the 20-year plan. It included roofs, and even though the costs are gonna change, at least you
Right.
can schedule them and put things off as needed, so you don't have two large projects in the same year.
Yeah, exactly. And we can do our planning financially too, a little bit. With
Right.
some foresight.
The toughest part is the library where it's joint.
Right. That's a discussion that we'll have in a moment, I think, as part of the capital plan. Anything else from the finance committee? Bill, do you have anything else that you'd like to add to?
Not really. I mean,
No changes in capital requests?
but just what's on the sheet
What's on the sheet?
can we
Okay.
look at that, please? I
is
just,
quite a bit.
it was up a minute ago, but I just wanted to, if we could have a look at the capital. Thank you.
There's a couple of things. We used to buy all of our equipment outright. We never leased anything, but about 5 years ago, we started leasing for whatever reason. And I'll start with road capital. This, like I said before, this is to supplement Chapter 90 money for large paving projects and cover winter damage in the spring. Winter damage alone is about $40,000 on an average year. Now that's $85,000 is what I'm asking, but about 12 years ago, we were going to shoot to match Chapter 90 money within 10 years. And we've never come close to it. The most we've ever had in the budget is 100,000. Last year we had 85. I just carried 85,000 over. Next, I have the John Deere backhoe, which is a 2020 backhoe. We just replaced our 12-year-old backhoe, which was costing us a lot to maintain. Next year will be year 2 of a 3-year lease at 36,000 a year. And we also have a John Deere loader, which next year will be year 3 of a 5-year lease at $35,000. I also
Those
put in,
lease to owns, Bill?
yes,
Are
all
they-
leased to own, correct,
So you pay a buck at the end and you've got it?
yes.
Okay, thanks.
I also added a 2021 ton Chevy dump truck with plow and a sander. We've gotten away from our replacement schedule the last few years. Our smaller trucks all have over 75,000 miles each. These trucks are used daily and are vital to our snow plowing operation. And the longer we keep them, the less dependable they become, and the more costlier they are to maintain. What I'm looking to replace this year is a 2008 one-ton dump truck with a sander in it, and it's got 85,000 miles on it, but they're hard miles, and starting to cost us some money to maintain. We haven't had a one-ton vehicle in 6 years now, and the one with the least amount of mileage on it is 52,000. I just happened to plow with it yesterday. That's how I knew that. Also, I'm asking for a trackless municipal tractor. And to buy it outright is expensive. That's our most used piece of equipment. It's used all 4 seasons. We can lease it for 4 years for $38,000 a year. To buy it outright is $143,000. And luckily, all of our we have one now that's 10 years old, and it's got a ton of attachments. It's got a 14-foot mower. It's got a snow blower. It has a boom flail for mowing everything from the sides of the roads to the rail trail. It's got a concrete grinder, which we use to grind the road up to repair it. We do as much in-house as we can. This machine is just straight out. It's got a broom. And all those attachments will fit a new one. So that's why, it's actually about $50,000 less. You don't have to buy the attachments. So I'm proposing we do that. And also a ride-on roller. I'm asking for $20,000 for a roller because we do not have one. Our 1989 roller finally died, and they haven't made it for 10 years, over 10 years, and we can't even get parts for it. The motor is fine, but nothing else is. So I know it's a large list, but these are what I'm asking for, and if we don't get everything, I just want them to be on the radar, and we'll just keep pushing it back as far as we have to get everything done. We're locked into the backhoe and the loader.
What would be your priorities, Bill, if you had to prioritize?
Well, we could always cut road capital, and the 1-ton dump truck. Luckily, the one I'm proposing to replace is it's a diesel, and so we can maintain that. It's hurting. We put a new dump body on it. It's starting to rust out. We do have an aggressive preventative maintenance program, and until we get all this snow, I've had the guys in there undercoating them and needle scaling and painting. So they look pretty good, and I know we can get another year out of it if we have to. But I just want it to be on the radar because, like I said, we haven't had a 1-ton vehicle in 6 years. Next year, you're going to have to replace 2 of them if we put this off too long.
So that would be your first priority?
Yes.
Is the
We have to
1-ton?
have a roller. The roller was unanticipated, and we need that for not just paving, but for ball field maintenance, and we use them down the parks on the grass and on all 5, well, more than 5 fields now. We maintain the schools fields.
And what about the trackless?
The trackless, I would not push that. We've already replaced the motor, and the clutch is slipping now. And if that goes, our sidewalks will not get done, because all we have is a Bobcat snow blower, and it's so slow, we'd never even get all the roads done, all the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Jim, just as a recommendation, as a longtime manager, I would not recommend cutting highway road capital. That is something that once you start going down that path, I'm not trying to be make a pun of that, but what happens is it keeps going down and down. Highway road work is something that is always required in a community, and it's always an appearance issue. And once you stop putting that down, the roads get in worse condition, and it takes even longer to maintain them. You may have to do more formal work if you start reducing that. I would even myself personally, I always generally even try to increase highway road capital. So if you're making reductions, I would personally try to stay away from that item. Bill, you can take Bill's advice. He's the department here, but I've just historically would prefer not to see highway road work.
Well, I totally agree, but in the years past, we're cutting our vehicle replacements. And at what point do you get back on track? We haven't been on a vehicle replacement schedule for 10 years now, and it's showing now.
Don't disagree with you, Bill. Don't disagree with you.
Oh, and I know, and I wish we could take a look at what we're spending on vehicle maintenance. You'll see that it's increased every year. And that's because we're maintaining older vehicles.
That would be an interesting number to have, actually.
Yeah.
As we think about investing in new equipment, what have we spent on vehicles? It's kind of like having your own vehicle, right? Your own car.
Right.
When do you stop throwing money at it and
right.
get a new vehicle? We track those costs, of course, right?
Oh yes, yeah.
I wonder if we could, pull those out just to do some comparative, that could keep throwing it at a truck that, has got 85,000 miles on it. What's it going to cost us to maintain it as opposed to have a new truck
right.
with less
I can look into what we've got. I've been breaking it down per vehicle, so we should know all that.
Yeah, it would just be an interesting look at it. Just to.
Okay.
Bill, your fuel costs must be down just because fuel's down.
Yeah, it's down,
Okay,
but will it be
So-
down in 6 months from now?
right,
I mean, we did that once and we lowered it and then the gas prices went up
yeah,
and we had to do, we had to take it out of street maintenance.
yeah,
That's a pretty fluid, it's a pretty fluid number to try to peg in any
Right.
way.
Well,
Right.
it's also, it's not really a good time to do that because Hamilton's refueling in our facility and that, they're looking at doing it permanently. So we need to look at that aspect as well.
I recall that
And-
from last year, talking about having a shared fueling station. Is that still being pursued? Am I imagining that?
No, it is. Hamilton has no tanks, so I know that they're looking into it as well as, we are, but I mean, there's no time frame at all at this point. They just wanted to see if it would work out. But we're in a one year trial with it, with our tanks.
and do you use a card system, or how do you keep track of that?
Well, we have, it's mechanical and they have keys for their departments. And they have 3 gas and 2 diesel ports. And so we bill them every month.
Okay,
And that also, that $80,000 in gas and oil, that provides fuel for all town vehicles, police, fire, COA, building inspector.
okay, so that could be allocated out to other departments and not just hit you in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, it never has been. I just want to let you know that that's
Yeah.
for all town vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
One more quick question. We've talked about it a bit on the side, but the facilities HVAC server, is that not listed?
Well, that's under facilities.
Okay.
This is just DPW
Oh,
capital.
of course, yeah. Okay, so that's still there. So are we reviewing facilities this evening or just DPW?
I think, Alex, I think I'm just looking at our time and I'm running short on gas myself here.
No problem.
No, I think what I'd like to suggest is for our final agenda item tonight that we do in fact go over the capital improvement plan. Jamie spent some time putting this together for us to take a look at, and the HVAC is included in that, Alex.
Okay,
Okay, Bill, FinCom, any further questions of DPW and Bill?
Thank you for everything, Bill.
yeah,
Okay, and the other thing is the tree warden is pretty much level funded.
Oh, okay, right.
There's a couple of small items in there.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate your kind of waiting your turn here this evening.
all right.
So, thank you.
Long day.
Yeah, 3 of them.
Thank you, Bill.
Good night.
Night.
Jamie, we want to take a look at the capital spreadsheet that you put together.
Actually, Jackie put this together. Let me pull it up. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Oh, Jamie, I'm halfway to pulling it up. I'm sorry. I was just being slow.
Oh, it's okay. Sorry. Jim, once we're done with this, I don't know if you want, I sent out 2 agendas that need to be approved. One's from November and I think one is from December, maybe. I think.
The minutes you're talking about?
Yeah, I meant the minutes, yes.
I read them through. I have them. Yes, yeah. Does everyone have those? Did they get sent out to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
I haven't read them.
Let's take a look at the spreadsheet here and then we'll see what we can do with the minutes and see how those are. Ah, that's better.
Can you see that, Jim? Is that big enough?
Yeah, I can, if I can see it, everyone else can see it.
Yeah,
So this spreadsheet should look semi-familiar to everyone it's the format we've been using the last couple of years for the annual program. And so everything that you see with this shaded out, those are all things that we're in multi-year lease agreements or debt payments for. So those are things that we do have to keep locked in. We don't have the opportunity to unfund those now that we've committed.
Right.
We also have updated it in the last few years. We were showing DPW having the Chapter 90. I've separated that here so folks understand where that's coming from the state. That's our Chapter 90 allocation, but it is important in the bigger context of our capital. You can see all of Bill's new projects listed. We did put in the trackless multiple municipal tractor as a 4-year lease at this point. This just shows a funding scenario in case you want to move forward with all of the options that are on the table. You can see the 2 facilities items that we talked about in January, the master plan and comp and class study, which we talked about in January.
Excuse me, just with that, with the master plan, just perhaps, I asked the question the other.
So ask questions. I don't have to go over everything. Whatever's
No, the only question I have about the master plan, and I asked the question whether that could be split up in 2 years, for example, and I can't remember the answer to that.
So the work could be split over 2 years. That was the answer on that Saturday.
Okay.
But the thing that Jamie might be able to help me on, from my understanding, I don't think that we could in terms of procurement, because you have to fully fund something before you go to procure it.
Okay.
So I don't know, because it's not a lease, how we would bind town meeting to paying for year 2. Jamie, I looked into that when I looked at my procurement materials. I didn't see how we could fund something like that we do through an RFP through 2 years. Have you had any experience doing it more than in 1 year? Jamie?
I apologize. Sorry. No, I haven't usually done typically 2 years. It's always been 1.
So that would be the concern, Jim, is that it would be difficult to procure a contractor because you have to do the bid and the contract based on the entire value of the project. And you would
year over year, the prices change like prevailing wage. So it would change it. So it's not typically something that you would do.
And we can't have the select board sign the contract if we haven't fully funded it. So that's my concern. I don't think that would be a concern for the land use department, but from the procurement perspective, that would be my concern in funding it over 2 years.
And that 125 now is not a RFP response number. It's a projected average cost from some of the costs they put up on of what it costs in other communities. It was kind of like about in the middle of a fair average cost.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. It's a conservative number for budgeting purposes. You know, we always hope to see that a competitive bid process would bring things a little lower than we expect. But if all of the bids come in and we haven't put enough money aside in the allocation, then we have to hold on the project for another year. Or something that I wouldn't feel comfortable recommending to FinCom, and I don't know if Jamie would either, is a reserve fund transfer to make up the balance. And that's, you know, our reserve fund is not large as it is. We don't have a huge amount of cash flow. Right. So to, you know, plan something with an RFT is not good practice at all. That's for emergencies. That's our backup plan. So I would, if the FinCom were to move forward, I'm very personally supportive of this project with, you know, my different hats that I wear. But from, you know, a procurement perspective, I think it does need to stay in one fiscal year. And I would recommend funding it from one funding source. But I think the overview tonight, you can see, if you look at the top of this sheet, you can see that all of these are currently funded in the operating budget. But the goal would be is that for what the FinCom chooses to fund other than leases, we would move those into a free cash capital article to help us work. I don't think we're going to be able to get away with no use of free cash to balance the operating budget, but we would transition all of the funded capital that's one time into free cash so that we could continue to work on lowering our structural deficit overall.
But I think that's the decision we need to make as we determine whether or not to fund these. Because we got to get the tax rate under control too. So we're not at the point that we can say that we're not going to use free cash, that we're going to use free cash for any of these, potentially.
Yes, it's just to show you this is what they all are all in. And at some point, talk about funding mechanisms as you want to, as you look through. This is so that you can be more evaluating the projects at this point. To your point, Alex, it's more about that than it is about where we're going to fund them from.
Makes perfect sense. But the master plan, and I get the procurement piece as to because we talked about 2 years, because it's such a big hit, and I think it was like 100,000. I understand 125's a bit conservative, and like splitting it up seemed like a viable solution until you did some homework and found out like the procurement technicality, right? Just because you're going through this process by which you're sanctioning the acquisition of vendors and keeping it all above board according to protocol, which is fine, but it's so hard because it's such an abstract deliverable, right? I think we're all generally sold and supportive of the concept, but it's just like, yeah, you can get a nice master plan for about $1.25, but you don't get to test drive it, so to speak. It's obviously nothing concrete, or that it becomes by its very nature, it's never concrete, right? We don't want it to be a book on the shelf and that's it. We know it'll have a lot more value, but it is tough to not have like a bid, so to speak, to review.
So you're saying that it shouldn't be in the list of capital items?
I wasn't even thinking that it was incorrect to have it in capital. I actually didn't have any view on that.
Okay.
If others do, I'm curious your thoughts. Carrie, do you think it's not a capital item? I mean, is it a capital item?
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I support it being in the capital budget, but it's it's a plan. It's not like
I mean, you can't depreciate it.
Right. Useful life is what, right?
It informs the use of, other capital. Master plan includes some capital.
I think you raise a good point. It doesn't feel like a capital item, but I don't know. I'm curious Tom, do you have?
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to remember, Alex, because when we funded it in Swampscott, and I'd have to check back, I'm trying to quickly look. Back on I believe we either had it as a standalone article or we had it in operation. I can pretty much guarantee you it didn't go under the capital plan. But I can have that as an email out to everybody probably tomorrow, how much it was, but it was through MAPC is what we did it through.
Jackie?
So I will say too, though, that as a smaller community, and I don't want to, I understand Tom's perspective, especially because he's been in much bigger municipalities where I would imagine the dollar figure might even be bigger, based on the time when they did it and the size of the community. I will say in terms of how we have set up our capital plan, because this is a one-time expense over 10,000, our capital plan is not limited to the brick and mortar. We included our website upgrade in the capital plan last year, and this is the second year in a row that we have the comp and class study. I think because we're so small and this is such a big one-time expense, and even that 15,000 for the study for comp and class, it can be considered a big expense and could create like a sharp increase and decrease in a year over year in our general fund budget that, is like we have to keep going back to explain that year over year. So the way we created the capital program many years ago, when we had a consultant come in, it was one of our community compact best practices. Because of our size, they recommended at the time for us that it made sense to include in our capital planning, because these types of projects are typically one time. They may come up every 5 or 10 years in the case of the comp and class study. But for us, because we don't have big investments on projects like this on a regular basis, I think it's important for us to include it in the context of capital, because it's a part of our free cash discussion and it's a part of our long-term planning. Even if it's not, a brick and mortar capital item or a fleet replacement item, for us, we are so limited when we make purchases of this nature, of these big things, with the exception of the many, many grants that we get for things like this. And if you look at last year's annual report, we did really great on grants, and we're already assembling the list from 2020 of grants we did get over the year. We do a lot of work like this in grants. So when we do go to town meeting for a project of this scale, I think it's important to help people in that context, because it's not normal. It's an abnormal project. It's a much higher dollar amount than we normally see. And with that, I know the FinCom members that know Susan is newer, but FinCom knows I get on my soapbox about the capital plan, but that's kind of where we are in terms of like the institutional context of why it's ended up in this plan.
If it wasn't in capital, where would it potentially, if it wasn't there, where else could it potentially land in our budgeting structure?
So typically for us historically, because we're so small, we have our operating budget, that's our Article 1 budget appropriations for the general fund. And then we typically have an article with all of the things that we're going to fund one time via free cash. So those are two categories of how we fund big projects, sometimes in one, sometimes in the other. You want the leases and the recurring payments to be in the general fund, so you hit them every year. It doesn't create unnecessary waves. So that's, again, to Alex's point a little while ago, that's getting into the funding mechanism. But because we kind of use those two funding mechanisms and there's really not a grant market for this, that's why we've added it to the capital plan over the few years we've been looking at it.
Okay.
I mean, I just checked the number in 2015 in Swampscott. It was 125,000 for the master plan through MAPC.
And that's Swampscott. That's a much bigger scenario than us.
Population's 15,000, 14,900, about that.
But far more, I mean, aside from residents too, to your point, like so much more complex zoning, commercial.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff going on that Wenham doesn't play with.
Was that a renewal of a master plan or was that a from scratch master plan? That's one comparison I wonder.
If I'm recalling, I believe we went out, MAPC did work about 10 years before that, but for some reason, I thought we had gone out for an RFP on it anyway. I would have to check, but it was MAPC and it was 125K, but I think they may have done work 10 years before that.
Yeah, it wasn't your first major master plan.
No.
Yeah. So that's a cost comparison too when we think about in your binders from January, Margaret did look at some comparable communities. So that might be worthwhile circling back to on that conversation as well.
Okay. Let's move along.
Are there any other particular items I can answer questions about rather than going through line by line?
Yeah, I just, the one time, the library we have, it looks, at least from this document, that 74,000 is new money. We've already voted and allocated that money. Does it belong? No what?
No, Jim, this is we already voted the 75K last year.
Yeah.
And so Kim is working with Tom. I know they're working actively right now on pursuing the warranties and what money we're going to be able to recover from that.
Yeah.
If everything falls through, we get nothing from warranties. We get nothing from, the materials having issues. This is an all-in number to get the roof at the library and the rec done. This would be our share to finish the project. So we would have our 75 from last year that split between us and Hamilton. And this would be our assessment to do the second half of the project just for the roof repairs of the two structure roofs. So this is a worst case scenario number. And the goal is that as Kim works through the warranties with our facilities director in the coming weeks, we're going to see that number hopefully go down significantly.
So that in total would be $150,000 for Wenham?
Correct, over 2 years.
So,
and you have specific estimates?
That's based on the estimates that Kim provided last week and then broken down based on the Hamilton Wenham assessment breakdown for the library.
So I just, if I might, I just got a call today from Bob Woodbury, who is the chair of Hamilton's Capital Planning Committee. And he had a number, it was a little confusing. I think we straightened it out. He had a number of 307,000 for the total costs. We did talk a little bit about the warranty issues, but he had this number of 307,000. He thought that what we voted on at town meeting, that 75,000, was split between Hamilton and Wenham. And I said, well, no, that was Wenham's vote allocation towards what we thought at the time. was our share of the costs. So then we got talking about, well, if it is 307, now correct me if I'm wrong here. If it is 307, we owe, let's say 105,000 of that, roughly a third. So that's where I'm confused with this number. If we've already allocated 75 and the total cost for us is going to be, let's say 105, wouldn't our total cost be another 35,000?
So Jim, that 75 is not a net number. This, because we are the lead for the library, that was the full allocation, and Hamilton, that was including Hamilton and Wenham, because we have to allocate the whole amount, and then Hamilton pays us an assessment for their share. So for planning purposes, this is just our net dollar amount right now for 22. But the 75 from fiscal 21 was an all-in number that we allocated as the lead community, knowing that there would be some of it coming back from Hamilton.
And was that 75 expected to be the full cost?
At the time, yes.
So we've gone from 75 to north of 300 with zero documentation other than what Kim provided last week, which was great. And is this the solar ready version of the project?
No, this is the roof repair to both the shingle and the rubber roof. So last year we were only talking about the shingle roof. So now we're also talking about the rubber roof.
Yeah, I still a lot of open questions, and obviously we're not here.
Absolutely. This is just a conservative number, so that, you know, I would say that just keeping in mind that we do have a May town meeting this year instead of an April town meeting. So typically at the beginning of February, we're much closer on capital of where we would be. But because we have more time, there's, you know, more work to be done. So this is just a high level where we're still working through, but the numbers there so that it's all in, because at this point we're starting to chip away at these numbers. We're not adding new things. So the goal of this is to be inclusive of what the possibilities are tonight, knowing that Kim is working what we've discussed last week with Hamilton. There's a lot of moving parts to that project right now, but this is so that if it moves forward, this is, you know, a number. But the goal would be is that we're going to see some return and some relief on those warranties, and that'll chip away at the number before FinCom makes its final recommendations to town meeting.
I don't think you'll have an answer by then. I can't imagine.
Yeah, we might have more of an answer. It's unfortunately one of those things that's a difficult timing piece with town meeting. This might be one of the last items that falls into play. And as you know, everyone here knows that sometimes you get closer to town meeting and the warrant's closed and more things fall into place. So I think this is unfortunately an item we'll have to be nimble on a little bit longer than we would like as we get into the town meeting time.
So just to add to this conversation I had with Mr. Woodbury, one of his baseline questions to me was, where is Wenham in making a commitment to the roof? And I said, well, it's certainly in our plans. We've talked about it. We've allocated the 75,000 from the prior year, but I explained to him that we haven't formally voted on this going forward.
Anything in it, not this year. And the 75,000 that was appropriated, looking back, I don't think we gave that careful enough attention, right? Based on what we've learned, the fact that it wasn't based on prevailing wage, I think, right? Right,
it was the prevailing wage issue. But he wanted to know whether we're going to go forward with this. And I said, it's high on our list. We've allocated, we had the initial allocation, but we need to, you know, there's more work that needs to be done. And we need to in the end, vote on it. Because he wanted to know whether to make a recommendation to their FinCom of whether to put in their share of the cost.
I've contacted town council to work with us regarding the warranty issues. We found to see what we can get if we get anything off the warranties for the library and recreation roofs.
It just feels like this is snowballed quite a bit, and it's problematic, because I think Susan raised a good point. Like the timing of this for that, you know, that warranty turnaround wouldn't be overnight. Those could take many months, I suspect.
Some have gone 2.5 years before they're resolved. And that's just on a residential, fairly small issue. So, I mean, I just don't think you can plan on that. And I think Hamilton, aren't they now starting to pay us back already on the 70 for the 75 for what they owe us? I don't know.
Yes, you are correct, Susan, because they allocated it differently financially than we did. So they're paying us back. But because the town of Wenham allocated it from the whole 75 from free cash, as they're paying us back, that's just going to stay on reserve for us because it's not a general fund appropriation that cuts off on June 30th. It's a free cash appropriation that like can extend. So
is anything leaking? Do you have buckets under anything? Is any water being caught or anything?
I don't believe
The last time we talked to, sorry, Jackie, the last time we talked to Kim, she said there wasn't there. She said she's picked up quite a few shingles off of in their, I guess, parking lot or outside. They picked up a lot of shingles, but as of yet, they don't have any leaks inside.
Yeah, like 80
Whether they did after Monday or Tuesday this week, I have no idea.
Right. That might be different now.
24 hours is a lot of time in our world lately.
Yeah.
The other thing that was raised, I hate to continue this, but he raised that it's a new, maybe Jamie and Jackie are aware of this, that the library is now looking, I guess as a capital expense, but then Bob said he's putting in an operating of an $18,000 security system. Are you aware of this? I mean, I hadn't heard this before.
This is the first I'm hearing of that.
I don't think that's for this fiscal year. I think that's a 5-year plan type of conversation. Kim had brought it up a couple years ago. It was a parting recommendation, I believe, from our former library director, but it is not anything we have on a current funding system for 22.
Did that be explored with them? I mean, I had made no commitment one way or the other because I didn't know anything about it, but.
Not to
I
my,
think we should follow up with Kim Butler. I mean, I think that, Bob and the Hamilton Finance Capital Planning Committee are great, but, we take our lead from Kim Butler. She's a department head that submits. So if we're not hearing from Kim Jim, it's getting late, sorry. If we're not hearing about it from Kim, then I don't expect it to be something we're needing to hear about yet.
Yeah.
I think we can look into it. I don't think it's going to be for 22.
Yeah, so Bob was talking about put it in fact in operations because the amount was so small, split between the two communities.
I
So
definitely
small,
haven't
but
heard for this year.
it doesn't even meet, a capital expense if you split it between the two communities.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie or I can follow up with Kim tomorrow.
Okay.
It's news to us, I think.
Yeah,
Just
it's definitely news
as
to me, so we'll definitely follow up with her.
It's just as an FYI from what I heard today from Mr. Woodbury.
and also, Jim, if it was a security system, I'd look at it more if it's whether something that could be done as a town-wide, looking at all our municipal buildings, if it's a system that we should also have something like that at town hall or so forth versus just one building.
I don't know if it went out to bid. I don't know where the number came from. It was just, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the tail end of this is all pretty straightforward. The police chief went over his 3 items. They've not been changing since last year. It's the year 2 of 2 for the rifles, the annual lease on the administrative vehicle and the frontline cruiser replacement, and then the annual transfer to water capital reserve for future infrastructure. So I would say, and then the iron rail ban, I'm sorry, I went over that, but that's an automatic expense. So this is just an overview of where we are right now. So if all of these projects were funded at this current rate, that would be approximately 679,000 of capital projects.
Can you explain the Johnson Controls thing? I'm sorry, but I don't understand that.
So actually, Susan, I apologize. I got an updated, more detailed quote from our facilities director, and I don't know if it went out with Jamie's packet yesterday. So my layman terms understanding of this, and now I've looked at the quote a little more extensively, is that our Johnson Controls is the contractor that we use to maintain all of the valves and pumps and HVAC equipment in the town hall.
Right.
And so because of technology encroaching in every part of our lives, all that HVAC is no longer just like a lever or a pulley. It's now on an automated software system. And that software system, because of how big and spacious it is, has to live on its own server that is secure. At this time, because we were in a shared facilities agreement with Hamilton at the time that we got the Johnson controls, that the current software lives on a server in Hamilton. There's concerns about the quality of the server because there's a lot of issues with it, and that falls to Hamilton's jurisdiction when it needs to be fixed. We don't have access to the building that it's in if we need to go and do something or restart the computer, restart the server. And so I think the proposal is that we have a server in-house in our building that just has Johnson Controls on it, that meets all of the technical needs of Johnson Controls, which is the software that revolves around the HVAC. So what we're looking for the FinCom to make a policy decision about is if we think that the cost benefit of having this be funded and be in-house versus having it be in Hamilton. So I would say that's something that more than that kind of layman overview, I would look to Bill Tyak to speak to, and unfortunately he's already left. But that's kind of where we are. Is that a helpful overview?
Can I just jump in also for a second, Jackie? When they call, since it's in Hamilton, when they call somebody out from Johnson Controls, they're paying this person by the hour. And sometimes they're waiting around for somebody from Hamilton to be able to let them in to where the facility is to do whatever it is that they have to do.
Is there documentation we can,
okay.
sorry, Susan, is there any
No, you're
or anything? Is there like that we can look at?
You cut out for me. I'm sorry. Say that again.
My web's been probably dodgy. Is there is there a bid that we can review?
Yeah, I got a new one that's more detailed from the last one we sent you, so I can send that out. I know Jamie probably has other to send out tonight, so I'll forward it down to her.
I mean, I looked in general at the Johnson Control software, and I don't think it requires anything remotely heavy duty. David, you know a lot more about the stuff than I do in terms of, server power really here. We're talking about pretty basic stuff. So I understand that there's a minimum amount of security that goes along with it, prevent people from hacking into your server and, jacking up the heat in town hall to 100 degrees, whatever. But unless the licensing or, associated license fees with the software or the software itself is extremely expensive, that just sounds like a ton of money for a very basic, simple computer. So, but we can learn more about it and talk to more tech savvy people than I. And I don't think this is like, I'm not blaming Bill. That's not his department. It happens to fall under facilities, but
we have a facilities director who is supervised by Bill. So that's how it kind of falls into Bill's loop.
Right.
Because a facilities director is a department of, sorry, Siri's trying to interrupt this meeting. Our facilities director is a department of one. And so that's where Bill works, overseeing on the budgetary aspects of that department as he manages. And that person also, does plowing and things like that. So it kind of falls under Bill. But I'll send out that quote I know Jamie has other things to send out tonight, so I'll make sure she has it to send down.
Cool, thanks so much.
And it appears that we would have, this is a question, we would have to stay with Johnson Controls. We couldn't go to another company for a more competitive bid.
That part I think is fine. Like just to be clear, I'm not questioning like the use of a Johnson Controls, web enabled, remote enabled, with all of your configurations that can be set by the facilities director with the existing hardware and stuff like that. That part's all fine. I'm just thinking it boils down to a pure IT thing. We're talking about buying a box to install the software on, hook up to the web, and just key it in, and have that person come out for Johnson Controls, turn the thing on, and we're pretty much good. And I don't think that's $35K or 32, whatever, for that box is what I'm trying to say. Pure IT question, not my area of expertise, but I don't think that software requires anything remotely powerful to run.
Well, and something to your point, Alex, that we can also do is we have our IT, contracted service company that we occasionally work with on our day-to-day computers. So I know they've helped me with server issues in the past, like when we started taking credit card payments and we needed a certain type of security on our server so that the information couldn't be stolen easily. So I can certainly, we haven't like cross-checked it with them, so we can certainly do that if you feel like that IT lens will be helpful, and ask them to maybe put together an email that we can forward to FinCom with their kind of detailed perspective from that point of view, if that would be helpful.
I personally think it would be.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
May I unshare my screen, or is there any other questions on this document as it's currently being presented?
No, it's pretty consistent with what we've seen before. The only thing that I just want to, and Jackie, I'll follow up with you tomorrow on the roof.
Yeah, Jim, I'd love to loop in Kim Butler when we chat. I think it would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to be clear about I may have misunderstood the 75,000 that was voted on at town meeting. I thought that was our meaning Wenham's allocation to our share of the costs.
Unfortunately, no. It's the same as when we fund the library operating budget.
Yeah.
We're funding the full library
The whole thing, and they reimburse us.
In the final wrap up that we did, the final revenue expense wrap up, there is something on our revenue roll up that covers the Hamilton share of that roof in the library assessment. So that was accounted for. So we would only have a net dollars lost for the project of what our share was, but we have to have Hamilton's share in-house to be able to spend it when the time comes, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right, folks. Let's see. It's 9 o'clock.
If it makes you feel better, the school committee's still going.
The what?
I said if it makes anyone feel better, the school committee's still going too.
They're crazy people, though.
They sometimes go to 10.
Yeah.
Highly rational, right?
And can I suggest that we defer a few other of the items on the agenda tonight? We were going to talk. We've covered most of it, actually. We've talked about liaison, free cash to address capital. We haven't discussed the material you sent out on the trash. Can we defer those? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a topic of trash fees, but I'm a little.
Okay.
But I'm a little. 9 o'clock's a good time to make a motion.
Okay.
And we have, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead, Carrie.
So I read most of the meeting minutes. I didn't attend the December meeting, but the one from November. And there is a summary of recommendations that, do you remember when Anthony Ansaldi did his like exit interview? And recommendations? I think it's worth us reviewing those as we go through the rest of the budget process. Like some of it we're already doing, but some of it we haven't touched on yet.
Oh, okay, yeah. But the minutes, I've read those minutes as well. To me, they look fine. Did anyone else have a chance to read those minutes?
I didn't.
I read November.
I'm looking at the November 18th.
Yeah, I reviewed those that were emailed out. There were 2 of them, right?
Yeah, there's November 18th and December 16th. The only thing I found on the 16th were a few typos, very minor kind of things.
I have one question about the November. I'm trying to find the number. Sorry, I'm using a teeny tiny screen. Okay, on the where it says FY19 legal budget was over budget under public input. If you go down to like the middle of that section, and the sentence starts with FY19 legal budget. Does anyone see
over
that?
budget 100?
Yeah,
Oh,
there's
right.
the parentheses 100,000. I just wasn't sure if that meant 100,000 was the overage or 100,000 was the total, or if that was a question mark, if it's in parentheses, because we need to double check the number. I'm just not sure.
I think if I remember correctly, the budget expenditure in 19 was in fact $100,000.
Okay.
That's what I recall from that.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if that was something we
I
should,
think the word over is maybe, that's a good catch, actually. I remember us talking about that budget and why it went in the way it did, but I think the budget, I don't have it in front of me, was $100,000.
okay,
And we might want to remove the word over, because that implies whatever the budget was, it was an additional $100,000 is what you're suggesting. If you read it.
yeah, or just, you could say like FY19 legal budget was over budget for a total of 100,000 or something.
Or
I just,
for, yeah.
I'll
would-
confirm that and make the change.
thank you.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Catherine. Anything else on the two sets of minutes? Catherine, I just found a very minor, let's see, typo on the December 16th. I can find it now. Just on the third page in, update on various financial matters. The solar project projects, you just, a typo on covering. I don't know if you see it there.
Okay, thank you.
Just a minor. And then and then on Mr. Molentano, under budget schedule, asked for a projection as opposed to, it's just a typo right there. You see that one?
Yes, thank you.
That's all I see, Catherine. I didn't see anything else. Carrie, anyone else have any comments on the minutes?
I have a couple small little inconsequential things that I'll email Catherine.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. I would like to see if we can accept these minutes, if that's satisfactory with folks. I'll make a motion first that we accept the meeting minutes of November 18th, 2020 of the Finance and Advisory Committee.
Second the motion.
Any other further discussion, questions? All those in favor of accepting the meeting minutes of November 18th? Aye, Jim?
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, David.
Okay, thank you. The minutes of November 18th have been accepted. I'll move that with the noted changes, that we accept the meeting minutes of December 16th, 2020 of the Finance and Advisory Committee. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Alex seconds. Any further discussion, questions on the minutes? All those in favor of accepting the December 16th minutes, aye, Jim?
Hi, David.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Alex.
And Carrie abstained since I didn't attend the meeting.
Okay. Okay, it's 4 and 1 abstention. Catherine, thank you very much, folks. I move that we adjourn our meeting and pick up, our next meeting will be next Wednesday, November 17th, to pick up further on the discussion items we didn't have tonight and other budgetary items.
Can I just jump in 1 second? I thought we weren't doing the 17th.
Oh.
We were doing, because the 10th is the 5 board meeting. The 17th was something else, I think. And I thought we were doing the 24th. I could have.
Well, I
school
think,
vacation week, I think.
Oh, maybe that's why.
And it's the night the school committee's gonna vote on their tentative budget, so we figured we would hold off until they did that too.
Well, we do have the complication that got presented tonight that Gary would like us to vote on the 17th on the legislative actions that are being taken and that we vote
Oh, yeah,
affirmatively
yeah.
to support that.
Tim, is that something we could take up at like a half-hour meeting before the 5 board meeting rather than having a separate event for that? I apologize, I was at a different Zoom, so I didn't hear the entire briefing, but is that something we could pick up with like a half-hour Zoom, like ahead of the 5 board, or
At the 24th, you mean?
no, on the 10th?
On the 10th, next week.
Next week, we have the 5 board with the 2 FinComs.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yes. today's
I'm
the-
just trying to maximize.
Yes, absolutely. I think we're looking at a 10-minute discussion or a 15-minute discussion.
Yeah.
That would be fine. I'm sorry, I got my dates mixed up.
Late at night, Jim. I think we all are going too soon.
So,
Right.
so at the 10th, this is the meeting before the large multiple cast
Yep.
meeting. Right? And that, when is that? What's the time schedule for that? Is it 7 or 6:30 or?
I think it was 7 the last time. I think.
Yeah,
Was it?
7. So you guys could meet separately at 6:30 to take care of that item, and then have a break, and then start with everybody at 7 if that's amenable on the 10th.
That's good.
And that's a school committee meeting. They'll be sending out invites from that.
Yeah.
Should get it soon if you haven't yet.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. So, so we'll just to clarify that. Thank you, Jamie, for reminding me. So we'll do a half an hour, 20-minute meeting before the 10th meeting to review that document that Gary wants us to approve. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
So we
Okay.
have the February 10th, and then we're skipping the next week. And when can someone tell me just what the next few meetings are? I'm not sure.
The 10th, and then the 24th.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
David, second, Susan made it, David second, all those in favor?
Aye,
Aye,
Susan.
Susan,
You
Hi,
got it.
David.
Alex.
I carry.
okay. Catherine, we all voted to adjourn. Thank you very much for a
Thank you.
long meeting tonight. I appreciate everyone's involvement. Thanks, Jackie, thanks, Jamie, thanks, Tom.
Thank
Good
you
seeing
all.
everyone. Good
Have a
seeing
good
everyone.
Thank
night.
you.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.